Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. They had only been attacked on 2 occasions. On both occasions, the attackers mysteriously dropped for some unknown reason, dead or knocked out. The only thing that was strange during the attack is the young married couple would be giggling to themselves afterwards. When it had first started, they were fearful for their lives. They kept their identities secret and maintained their assumed names when around anyone. To everyone they met, they were no Manado and Suki-sei, the young newlyweds that wished to travel before settling down to start a family. Little did anyone know, as the caravan rested during nights, they would sneak off into the surrounding areas and train themselves most nights. This, of course, was a requirement of Naruto's, insisting on training Hinata as best he could and had immediately started teaching her how to develop a ring. Hinata realized that Na did not know what he had done that to the man that held a knife to her throat the night before they entered the market village. Since it mimicked her chakra needle technique, she started to explain it to him and he quickly became aware of how he did it. He was developing the chakra needles and infusing them with his wind affinity, creating more of a deadly attack. To him, it was similar to what the wind release was, but on a much smaller scale and an elongated length. Hinata continually impressed Naruto with how quickly she developed new skills. By the time morning came, the people traveling in the caravan would only have seen a happy couple asleep in a single sleeping bag with her head resting over his heart. Hinata glanced over at the love of her life, and the look on his face melted her heart. He had that boyish grin he had become known for due to the impatience that ran through his body. He held himself back the entire trip, wanting to stick to the story of just being civilians, even though it nearly killed him inside to be traveling so slowly. Na had definitely changed through the years, growing into a man that more often took the time to think before he left. Pulling him out of his daydream, she took him by the hand and started to lead him into the town, often choosing to walk this way. Hinata had grown quite comfortable displaying affection in the open. And even when they slept together, even though their bodies would heat at each other's touch, they haven't gone beyond kissing and holding each other at night. She was happy that Naruto seemed comfortable with taking this slow as she was still nervous over progressing things further. As they walked through town, they slowly started to window shop as normal couples would. Hinata would occasionally point at things that she liked that were on display. They stopped in a small cafe for an early afternoon snack of something hot to eat and information on the port destinations the town provided. Hinata devoured 3 large cinnamon rolls in what Naruto could only think of as the display of eating that he had ever seen in his life. He was not sure if she did it on purpose to tease him or not, but he had a feeling that her obsession for the sweet treat more than likely surpassed his own for ramen. He had eaten a bowl of hot miso soup and 2 sandwiches. Hinata had half a sandwich because he doubted anyone would compare to Ikyaku's ramen. They picked up some travel brochures at the entrance gate to see if they could book passage to their next destination. It seems from this port you can travel nearly anywhere you wanted to go as long as there was water near it. Unfortunately, the one place they needed to go was not available as a tourist destination. They decided that they would have to check the port to see if there were supply and trade ships that would be heading out to the island that they could get a ride on. They would also like to stay in the town for the night so they could rest up, finally get a hot shower and something other than the instant food they had been eating along the road. With the daily plans laid out for the day along with gathering new supplies because they had no idea the condition of the place they were going to, they set off for the port to get passage to their next destination. Once they reached the port, the smell of the ocean was much more noticeable, and the sound of the waves lapping at the docks was soothing to the ears. They visited any business that had a boat that would be capable of taking them home. Much to their dismay, it would not be so easy to get to the island. There were a couple obstacles in their way, the most obvious of which is the deadly waters that surrounded the island. Only some of the larger boats could make the trip, which limited their choices of companies that could take them. The second problem was the inhabitants of the island, which most businesses know very little of. From what Naruto and Hinata could figure out, the residents were under a daimyo society, and the ruling class there didn't take too kindly to visitors, for which they didn't know why. For the boats that did offer supplies there, the crews were rarely ever allowed to leave the dock area. The last reason, which had Hinata the most concerned over, was that the next ship heading out there wouldn't be going for another month and a half. Much to her surprise, this didn't seem to bother Naruto at all. As they headed back into town to do some shopping, knocking a few things off their supply list, he seemed actually happy about it. Minato-kun, how are we supposed to get out there without a boat? Oh, I have an idea, he responded with a grin. I was thinking about that the entire trip here. There was a possibility that the island wouldn't have any trade at all, considering that the people on the island were wiped out. At least knowing that there are people, there very well could be something there for me to find. I will get us there and we will be leaving early in the morning so we won't attract attention. For now, let's enjoy the rest of the day together. It may be a while before we get a chance like this again. With that, they were off to enjoy their time shopping once again. This time, when they did so more together than apart. She held on to his arm most of the time, resting her head on his shoulder only to look up to steal a kiss or if she saw something that caught her eye. Their shinobi supplies were already at full stock since they hadn't used any the entire trip here. Their main focus was on food and other travel necessities if they were to make their time on the island a little more bearable. More clothing would be needed, and they quickly went clothes shopping. The only thing they bought that was not a necessity was dress that Hinata was eyeing in a shop window. While growing up, her clothing selection had been near limitless. Although she rarely wore the fineries that being a Hauga had offered her, she had to admit that it was nice to dress up every once in a while. Upon seeing Hinata's reaction, a plan formulated in Naruto's mind that gave him a grin that would have made Kurama proud. He quickly grabbed Hinata's hand and led her into the shop. It was a long sleek black dress that hugged her figure as if it was designed just for her body. From the left shoulder was a strip of fabric that shimmered depending on how the light hit it, changing it from a light blue to lavender that complemented her eyes and complexion. It crossed her chest to her right and wrapped around her waist. It then followed a slit down the right leg where it met the bottom of the dress, ending at her mid-FC. Hinata was at that moment the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Not that she didn't take his breath all the time. Thinking it was a little too extravagant and unnecessary, she went to change back into her clothes. While doing so, Naruto quickly grabbed the dress, paid for it, and put it in a box, then in his bags. After they had finished shopping, they went to the local inn and got themselves a room for the night. Hinata had noticed that Na had been acting strange near the end of their time out. As they walked into the room, Hinata went over to the table to set down her bags while Naruto dropped his down near the door and started rummaging through them. When she turned around to see what he was doing, she was taken by surprise by Naruto standing behind her with his head bowed, holding out a package to her. "Naruto-kun, what is this?" she said, taking the package and began to open it. Just as she saw what was inside, he piped in. "Would you like to go out on our first date tonight?" She dropped the box in a fit of tears and embraced him with a long kiss. When she pulled away, she started to twist the ring on her finger. She always found that it gave her strength. "Well, we have been married for almost 3 weeks, she said with a smile. "I think it would be a great idea," as she wiped tears from her eyes. She picked up the box and excused herself to the bathroom to change while he sorted through their purchases, putty them away in their travel gear. Shortly, they found themselves in a nice restaurant, not like one of the high-dollar places that dotted the clan districts of Konoha, but nice enough to make it feel like an official date where a couple would go. Hinata couldn't help but giggle every now and then at how proper Naruto was trying to be. When they brought them their food, he even tried not making a face at the vegetables that were on his plate. As the meal came to an end, he reached across the table to take his Hyuga princess by the hand. Thank you for everything you've done for me. When I first started this trip, I thought I would always be alone and I would have probably died that way also. In any other circumstance, I would have wanted to date you properly. Given what we have, I will try my best to make you as happy as I can. I know you may have wanted to hear this sooner with all the feelings I have for you, but I had to sort things out inside myself before I could open up to you the way you deserve. I love you, and as long as you will have me, I will remain by your side." That had done it. She couldn't contain it anymore. The emotions she had for him overwhelmed her. Without letting go of his hand, she quickly made her way around the table. She sat in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck, and kissed him for everything that she was worth. She poured more of herself into that one kiss than she even thought she had. The dress she wore made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The man she held in her arms made her feel like the most loved one. After dinner, they made their way back to the inn, and upon entering the room, uneasiness settled between them. Both instinctively knew what it was. Since the time they started acting like a couple, this was the first time they were ever alone together in a room, preparing for bed. They had been traveling together with a caravan, and the thought never crossed their mind while in front of other people. If they could have only read one another's minds, things would have been a little more relaxed. Naruto had developed a deep-seated need for being near Hinata, but didn't want to come off as too forceful. While Hinata was timid, she wanted to give Naruto her all. This was such a perfect and romantic night that to do just that. To both of their surprise, Hinata made the first move. She crossed the few field that separated them slowly and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling his head down. She kissed him with all the intention she had. Naruto could do nothing but return the kiss in kind as he processed what was happening. He had been around Eros sensei enough to know how everything worked, but he was at a loss for the knowledge he thought he had. He leaned his head back a little to break the kiss. "Hinata, are you sure?" Hinata looked at him while her head was half tilted to the floor, and the blush on her face was more than apparent. With a slight nod and a smile, she spoke. "Yes." With that, he wrapped his arms around her waist and crushed her body gently into his, kissing her as if that alone would leave an imprint on her so everyone would know how much he loved her. When he struggled for breath, he trailed his lips to her neck, gasping. He wasn't sure if he needed the air or if he was trying to live off the scent of her body alone. Every kiss along her neck sent shivers down her back, and small gasps of pleasurable sensations escaped her lips. Wanting to see Hinata as the goddess that he was to worship his entire life in all her glory. They remained standing while he slowly undressed her. He lowered the strap on her left shoulder first. As he kissed where the material had been, while she pulled her arm from it, his mouth made its way to T. He opposite side just to repeat the actions so he could again capture her mouth. She was watching him, excited by how delicate he was treating her and how his hands felt across her bare skin. Every time his kiss would come across a sensitive spot, her hands would tighten, grabbing the back of his shush. This was all new to her, and she loved the way he made her feel. She had almost lost it when he placed his hands at her side to grab the fabric of the dress and move it down her body. Hinata's body shivered as her cream-colored flesh became slowly exposed to the air. As the dress was going down, so was her beloved, trailing his soft lips across her body, causing her to become rigid with desire only to relax due to the heat he built inside of her. He was on one knee now, and she could see the top of his head as he was trailing kisses up her thigh, stopping just for a moment to pay particular attention to the area where the thigh met her hip. She about collapsed to the floor. If it wasn't for the fact she was bracing herself with her hands on his back as he licked that sensitive area, she would have. Na pulled back slightly to stand himself up, taking in the view that was Hinata. He had seen her like this before when he had stripped her after they went through the waterfall, but his only thought at that time was to get her warm again. Now was completely different. She seemed like a siren, calling out to him with her body. His body was demanding her, aching to touch her. He drew her close to him again and kissed her deeply, rubbing his hands along her back and sides to feel the softest skin he had ever known. It was double heaven to him as the skin against his palms was soft and the feeling of her long hair caressing his forearms drove his knee deeper. Her narrative was driving her crazy with what he was doing, how he was making her feel. She almost couldn't stand it. If it hadn't been her first time with her timid nature, she would have been more demanding. She wanted to be brave and follow his lead. So, she mustered enough courage to slide her hands under his shirt to feel his chest and allow her hands to dance across his back. She ran her hands across every detail and curve of each muscle, trying to memorize his body through touch alone. With Hinata's hands playing across his skin, his shirt felt like it was constricting his breathing. It was tight, and he thought he would lose consciousness from lack of oxygen if he couldn't get it off. He quickly broke the kiss just long enough to lose the life-threatening material. He immediately went back to discovering Hinata with his hands, running him up and down her thighs and trailing to her supple rear, pulling her close to him. She then placed her hands on his chest and pushed him back a little, leaving him with a bit of a dumbfounded look until he saw what she was doing. Her ache to be released, they were hard and sensitive against the fabric that contained them. She looked at Naruto for his reaction to her standing there as she reached behind her to unclasp the piece of lace and let it fall to the floor. The look of desire that was written there made her smile. She knew what they were doing. They were discovering, and they aimed to learn as much about each other as possible. With the look on his face as encouragement, she closed the gap by leaning in and kissing him more, leaving enough space between them so she could place her hands on his stomach and feel the definition of his abs. She wanted to worship the way he made her feel. Hinata had never thought she was overly pretty and may have only been a little more than average. But at this moment, with his attention on her body, she felt that no other woman could compare to her in his eyes. As he had done in training, his attention to her was giving her the strength and courage to push forward despite her insecurities. She trailed her hands down to his waistband and unhooked the clasp that held his pants in place. As Hinata started to remove his pants, he moved his hands to assist her. In what seemed like an eternity, they both looked down at him, becoming exposed. There was a great relief of pressure as his pants were pushed away, releasing him from the confining material that kept him bound. He had never felt more vulnerable than he did at that moment, with her looking at his exposed member. Looking back at her face, he was almost sure there was no blood left in her body, with the exception of her face. Looking at Na in all the glory that he was, she was shocked. Through all she knew about the male body, she had actually never seen one like this. He was larger and had more girth than expected, giving her thoughts that it would never fit. Doing her best to put that aside, she was not going to back down. As he stepped out of his pants, she closed the gap and needed his warmth, pressing their bodies against each other. While doing so, she pulled him along as she walked backwards toward the bed. Through all the stimulation from his eyes to his hands, she was feeling weak and needed the relief from her legs. As she sat on the bed, he leaned down to continue the kiss and situate himself on his knees. Taking her suggestion, as she had done with him, he placed his thumbs inside the waist of her lace underwear and started to pull them off as she slowly lifted her hips off the bed. He traced the path her underwear took with his eyes as he pulled them off her legs. Then in reverse, his eyes traced back up her legs to where they had once been. Slightly parted, he could see the carefully manicured patch of hair at the top of the folds that made up her womanhood. She was wet with invitation by the sheen he saw there. He moved his way up to capture her mouth, and she led him further up the bed. Maintaining his position between her legs as she laid her head on the pillow, he was trying to be careful not to put all his weight on her for fear of crushing the flower that was underneath him. He dipped his head to hers to capture her mouth with a kiss that told her his heart would forever be in her hands. His chest pressed lightly against her aching and sensitive played against his skin, sending her through small spasms of pleasure. He broke the kiss and she looked up at him. She thought it was the cutest thing she had ever seen with the uncertainty on his face. He was having a hard time finding the words, but she knew what he wanted to ask. She nodded to him and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down for another kiss while lifting her hips to press against him. As in unison, he pressed against her, and he slowly started to enter. There was a great amount of pressure as he slowly moved, and she could feel her body adjusting for the sheer size of his heart erection, even though it was gripping him tight. Small waves of pleasure she never thought possible coursed through her body. He then stopped and she looked up at him. She felt within herself the unusual sensation of pressure with a slight amount of pain. It was now or never, and she would never give up on the feeling she had for her Na. "Make it fast and then don't move," she said in a little more than a whisper. As in direct response, he pushed against her heart, tearing her hymen, pushing deep into her. The pain was sharp as he filled her and tears poured from her eyes while they clamped shut. They were tears of happiness to her as she gave her innocence to him. Her eyes slowly opened as the pain subsided and her body adjusted. Her breath was taken away as she saw the caring and concern etched on his face. She reached up and brought his head to hers to kiss it away. As she did, he moved and she moaned in his mouth at the pleasure he was making her feel. Her hips bucked against his like they had a mind of their own, wanting to feel more of him. Through the kiss of her soft lips and the enthusiasm she was showing him, he slowly started to move again. The feel of her wrapped so tightly around him was making him lose control of his own body. As they deepened the kiss and he built up speed and rhythm, she placed her hands around his back. The faster and harder Naruto pushed into Hinata, the more she began to dig her fingers into his shoulder blades. The sounds that escaped with her intoxicating voice drove his animalistic desires further. He moved more as her demand for his body could be heard through gasps. The pleasure she was giving him was as much from her sounds as it was from her tightness around his throbbing manhood. This had to be a dream, he was thinking to himself. There was no possibility that he could feel this way in his entire life. Wave after wave of pleasure was sweeping through her body as he increased his pace. He was pushing deep within her, filling her. An emptiness she never knew was there. Her body was not hers. It moved and bucked with its own desire. She was a prisoner to the pleasure. Even the gasps of pleasure coming from her was not of her control. She was reaching the edge of a cliff she knew she could not stop going over. The ebb and flow of the movements of their bodies worked in tandem to drive each other out of their minds. The growls that came from him let her know he was enjoying the way she made him feel as much as she was feeling from his. They were coming to their climax and she was having a hard time holding it back for fear of shattering her mind. The only thing that escaped her now was her voice calling his name and chanting her love for him. Naruto was done for. He was lost in his desire and love for the woman that lay beneath him. He was driving himself insane with each movement. The closer he reached to his limit, the faster he moved, the deeper he reached. He could hear Hinata call his name, declaring her love for him. He looked down at her and nearly lost it at the sight of her. The goddess beneath him then screamed out his name in what he thought was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Her body began to shudder and tighten even more around him, and he knew his doom was near. At once, she pulled him closer to her as she rode out her pleasure, causing him to release the pressure that she created in him. He released inside of her and slowed down due to exhaustion. He stayed there for a moment, looking into her pale lavender eyes with tears in his own that someone could make him as happy as she had. Slowly, he removed himself and started to lie on his side, taking her with him so he could stay lost eye in her gaze. Neither talked for what seemed like minutes until he placed his hand on the side of her face. He told her, "I love you." It was the only thing he could think to say. Nothing in his vocabulary could convey the feelings that washed over him as he held his princess in his arms. He reached down to pull the covers over them. They wouldn't talk about what they had done. It was going to take a while for each to process what was running through their minds. They laid there and kissed each other over and over, just looking at each other, content with life in the world they felt. They created that didn't exist outside of their room. They fell asleep just staring into each other's eyes, knowing that the only way their life would ever remain happy was to be in it together. As the first morning light started to make its way through the window, Naruto was waking up. During the night, he had rolled onto his back, and Hinata was now laying her head on his chest with her leg pinning one of his to the bed. He could feel her body pressed against him and her firm press into his side, arousing him again. He looked at her soft face and her whisper of a breath playing against his skin. Not wanting to disturb her, he slowly made his way out of bed to allow her to sleep a little more. He wanted to surprise her, so he got dressed and left the room. After a short while, he returned with a small bag and saw the woman of his dreams still lay in bed fast asleep. They had to get going soon, so he decided to wake her, but in the best way he could think of, Na walked up to her as quietly as possible and leaned in behind her. He kissed the small of her neck with a slight scrape of his teeth, getting the response he wanted. Hinata's eyes popped open at the feeling, and with a smile, she turned to face him, pulling him in for a deep kiss. They separated and Naruto walked to the table to get the surprise while Hinata sat up and wrapped the sheet around her. He brought her the bag and sat on the bed while she searched for the contents. Her eyes grew wide at the sight of her favorite treat in the bottom. He was being so sweet to her, and to her the world was perfect. As they sat there on the bed, they were slowly bringing themselves back to reality. They talked about the plans for today, but Na still wouldn't say what his plans were for getting out to the island. After her breakfast in bed, Hinata got cleaned up and dressed. They packed up the things and made their way to the outside of town down by the water. Hinata looked at him with bewilderment. "We cannot swim across to the island, Naruto. We don't have to," he said, looking at her with a devilish grin that only made her want to kiss it off his face. He brought his thumb to his mouth and bit hard enough to bring a small amount of blood to the surface. He then slammed his hand to the ground and in a big puff of smoke, a large toad appeared. He was larger than any house that they had ever seen. Chief Toad, how you doing? Na called up to his good friend. Good to see you as well. Word is that you are dead. I'm a little relieved that our last Toad Sage is still around. Gamabunter responded. Why have you summoned me here, young one? There is an island out there that we need to get to. We would take a boat if we could, but another one does not go to the island for more than a month from now. We need to get out there as quickly as we can, explained Narut the best that he could. He knew how the Toad Chief hated to be thought of as a taxi, but hoped he would look past that. Gamabunter looked down at him and then over to Hinata before responding. What makes you think that I can be simply called here to take you around like a pack animal? And do you expect me to let her ride atop my head as well? Narut took Hinata by the hand and pulled her close to him. Come on, Gamabunter, don't be like that. This is really important. Also, she has to come with me. She's my wife, Narut said with a cheeky grin, holding his hand up so Gamabunter would see the ring. Well, this is cause for celebration and with a Hyuga maiden no less. Shima and Fukusaku will be pleased to hear you have decided on a mate. So, tell me, my young pupil, when will you be having tadpoles? The elders would love to meet them. Hinata was in an all-out blush and stuttering. Here they were considering themselves married for the sake of keeping up appearances, and Naruto was taking it seriously, as though they were, and that made her heart melt. She would consider the same, too. She would now and forever think of him as her husband. But children, the thought hadn't crossed her mind as of yet. She just had her first experience at making love to her lifelong love, and the giant toad was talking about children. Narut looked over at her and could see the wheels trying to work in her mind as the blush lit her face at the thought of children. Of course, he would want some with her, but that was for another time. Hinata was so adorable when she was like this. Stop embarrassing her like the chief toad. I would like to see the toad sages, though. But we have to get to that island soon. What do you say? Will you help us out? I suppose I could this time. Besides, it would be an honor to have you ride atop me, Mrs. Uzumaki Gamabunter replied. Hinata bowed deeply to the great toad in front of her and said, thank you for his kindness. With that, Narut picked her up bridal style and jumped on top of Gamabunter's head. Thanks, Chief Toad. So, what is the island you need to get to in such a rush? Gamabunter asked while turning to prepare to jump into the water. Holding Hinata tight and preparing for the leap and eventual splash, Naruto quickly said, the land of whirlpools. The couple stood on the beach of Usuzu Nunkuni, about a mile from what was the capital, Azu Shioke. Gamabunter had already departed, complaining about a rash he would be having for a week, in which Narut continually thanked him and apologized for making him swim in the salt water, promising him that he would make it up to him. The island was a paradise, and they were happy that Gamabunter agreed to take them. It had taken days off the time it would have taken by boat. Through the information they had acquired in the port town, they knew there was a small village in what once was the old N village. Narut and Hinata moved closer to their destination at a brisk but cautious pace because this was for the most part uncharted territory. They had no idea what the daimyo was like or if the people would be hostile to outsiders. As they got closer to the small village, there was a sense of foreboding and oppression in the air. Most of the houses that could be seen were nothing more than run-down shacks. In some cases, there were holes in the houses that allowed you to see right through. Hinata activated her Byakugan to see if there were any inhabitants in the immediate area. To her surprise, there were actually quite a few, and they were all doing their best to not be seen, but trying to see the newcomers. Each taking a deep breath, they entered the run-down village, hoping for the best. They made their way down what they could tell was a market area with what were hopefully stores facing out into the street. They had seen people popping their heads out only to retreat again into the shadows. There was an occasional shuffle sound for only a few moments only to return to silence. It was giving them a serious case of the willies. At once they heard some arguing near the end of the street and a man walked out with a bag. A bag that had another owner, a young woman begging the man to give it back. Please, not today. If you can come back tomorrow, I will have more. You can have as much as you want then. The man was fairly tall, about a head taller than Narut, and he carried a sword at his waist. He had dark hair slicked back and a snide grin on his face, as if he enjoyed the torment of the young woman who was pleading with him. You should pay on time. I had to come all the way out here to collect from you and that brat. You should be thankful that I don't just put him out of his misery. That's an idea, and then you wouldn't need so much food. Please, no, you can have it. Just leave my son alone. He has done nothing but be ill. The woman then released the bag and sunk her head to the ground in a grumbling manner, pleading for her son's life. The man looked down at her and with a disturbingly unnatural smile. He started to bring back his leg in an attempt to kick the woman when there was a loud crack. A small rock had hit him square in the knee that was supporting his weight. His knee shattered with a loud crack, bringing him to the ground with screams of pain. The woman looked up at where the man once stood, only to find him laying on the ground in front of her in agony from his mysterious injury. She then looked down the street to see two people running toward her. Suki, check the woman. I got the creep, Na said while dashing to help. Taking his lead, Hinata simply replied, okay, just be careful. Hinata ran to the woman's side, which looked like she had seen a ghost. Hinata quickly checked the woman over aside from a few scrapes and dried dirt covering her face. She seemed fine. Are you okay, mom? Are you hurt anywhere? Shaking her head as if she was coming out of a dream. A look of fright crossed her face. Go away. You will only make things worse. The woman quickly got to her feet and headed back inside. With silent sobs, she closed the door. That was strange. Manado, did you see that? Hinata said as she got up and turned to Na. Na had a knee on the man's chest and a kunai in his hand, trying to get information on why he would treat someone that way. A sheath was a few feet away from him, and from the looks of it, the sword that was supposed to be in it was embedded into a ear. By tree, tang deep. The man was still trying to clutch and protect his shattered knee, doing his best to pay attention to what the blonde on top of him was saying. I don't know anything. I'm just a newbie. I've only been on the island for a few months. The boss is only a couple streets over. They just sent me to get some food. Please help me, the man said through broken speech and cries of pain. Did you have to hit him in the knee like that? Hinata asked, seeing that the man was in a lot of pain. Without taking his eyes off the man, Naruto replied, better the knee than his head. He wouldn't be able to speak if his head looked how his knee does right now. At least he won't be going around threatening to beat any more women again. He would be lucky to walk right again. Hinata looked down at the man's knee. Na was right. It was already swollen to the point that his pants were the only thing keeping it from growing larger. If Na hit him in the head like that, it would have exploded. Na had no tolerance for those that have a little power and choose to pick on anyone weaker than themselves. He would protect all he could. Naruto finally lifted the man a little by his collar and punched him square in the face, forcing He man to lose consciousness. He left him there on the ground and turned to face Hinata. From what I could get out of him, he is more or less a hired thug. The daimyo here controls this small village, keeping the people in a constant state of fear. I know what you mean. The woman I tried to help just looked at me like I had the next plague. It almost seemed like she couldn't get away from me fast enough, Hinata said with an evident tone of concern. With almost the sound of defeat, he continued, I was hoping that we could just get some information here without going through any hassle. With what we have seen, I don't think we will get anything out of the villages. Our only other option is to go to the top of the food chain and ask him ourselves. If there are more like this guy here, he pointed down at the man lying on the ground. Then we may be in for more than we thought. I don't think we have any other choice, she said as she accompanied Na walking again down the street, leaving the man behind them. The closer they got to the compound, the less the place looked like a daimyo, and the more it looked like a man who treated these people like animals, maybe even pets. It sickened them both to see such dilapidated living conditions. The way the people were acting, you would think that this state had taken years, possibly a decade or two, to occur. The couple finally reached what looked like the walls to an estate, much like the walls that surrounded the Hyuga comp. Hinata activated her Byakugan to look into the area along with what seemed like the main house. They would need to know what they were running into. Looks like there are 26 people inside, although it is interesting. What is it? Na said quietly, not wanting any surprises. None of them seem to be shinobi. Maybe with the exception of one, possibly two. Their chakra systems are not developed. It is like this island hasn't seen ninja for many years, Hinata said with curiosity. Pondering Hinata's comment, Naruto considered how they would go about getting the information they needed. Well, let's not take any chances. I don't think they could really harm us, but I don't want any surprises. He placed his hands in his famous cross position. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Roughly 50 clones surrounded them before taking off into the compound. Hinata and Na just stood outside the gate of the compound and listened to the chaos that was going on inside. Much to Naruto's surprise, he could count that more than 75% of the guards in the area had been taken out, knocked unconscious, and not a single clone was destroyed yet. Figuring the gate was clear, they made their way to the main house. Upon seeing the front of the house, Naruto froze in his tracks as he stared at the outside wall. It took a moment for Hinata to notice what Naruto was staring at, but when she did, her jaw nearly dropped to the floor. Above the door, it was plain to see a large swirl pattern that was the symbol of the Uzumaki clan. They were standing in the compound that once housed the Uzumaki family. There was a man inside a large sitting room of the main house, of which he was taking up as much of it as he could. He was a muscular man with a large build and short hair that had a look like he kept it pined. He wore an open shirt and trousers. His most distinguishing figures were his beady eyes and almost disproportionately large nose. He heard the commotion outside and even a little in the house, but for the most part didn't seem too concerned. There was a knock on the door, and figuring that the villagers that tried to attack the compound had been dealt with, he simply said, "Enter." Much to his surprise, the person who had opened the large door was not one of his minions, but a boy around the age of 16 to 17. The boy had blonde hair and a strange cheeky grin. At the foot of the boy was the man that he thought would have entered, obviously knocked out. "So, I take it you are the one who was causing all the commotion out there." "You can say that, I guess," the boy responded. "Are you the guy in charge?" Ignoring the kid's question. "So, how many of the villagers have decided to challenge me this time?" Not understanding the question, "Holy," the blonde responded. "None, just me and me." Another voice came from an open window to the man's right. When the man looked over there, he saw the same kid standing there. Then looked to the door and there was one there still. Twins. Cute kids. Real cute. It will take more than a couple BRZ to scare me. You really shouldn't treat people this way. Chaining them to the ground like some animal. That's just sick. There were two young women around Hinata's age chained to the floor, and the look of life had long left their eyes. The man snapped his head to the left to see another one standing by his place, checking the women to see if they were all right. Triplets? Really? Your mom must have been huge. Are there any more of you genetic freaks out there? All in unison, they looked up as they were listening to a voice in their head. Then they spoke the same words at the same time, giving the older man a bad case of goosebumps. "Oh. Boss is pissed. Sorry, mister. We got to go. Boss will be here in a few seconds. Pray now while you can." With that, the clones all disappeared in a puff of smoke. Clones, the man thought to himself. That means there are actual ninja on the island. Probably just a couple BRZ wandered out here. Despite what he was thinking, there was concern in his eyes. He would be undeterred nonetheless. No one was going to take away his paradise. It was only a few moments before a boy who looked like the clones that had just disappeared walked through the door. Behind him was a girl that had pale lavender eyes and long hair. The man had never seen anything as breathtaking as the girl that stood before him now. He actually licked his lips at the idea of taking her for himself. The boy didn't acknowledge him at all and instead walked over to where the man's prisoner playthings were restrained. One by one, he grabbed the steel bracelets around the young women's wrists and snapped them with what didn't seem like any effort at all. They stayed there motionless on the floor, still lost to the world. "Suki, can you help them? This man and I are going to have a little talk," Naruto said with an overbearing sense of disgust in his voice. Without saying a word, Hinata made her way to the women on the floor and began looking them over. "How could you do this to these people? This is sick and inhumane." Na was now addressing the man. The man just sat there as the two almost didn't notice that he was there or that he wasn't worth their tea. Well, it seems that you are the real one. My village is none of your concern. What I do to my people is my business. Although you have piqued my interest. You took out all my guards, which tells me you have some skill. How about we make a deal? You work for me as my personal guard, and you will have anything you could want. And in exchange, the man looked behind Naruto at Hinata with a possessive stare. You give me that. Before the man knew what happened, Anna was holding his pant leg to the ground with a loud thud. The girl was now staring at him with a look that could kill. Minato, Hinata said, still staring at the disgusting pig that was looking at her lustfully. He made her skin crawl with the way he looked at her. They are physically fine despite being used as slaves. They are a little starved, no outward wounds, and neither is pregnant at the moment. They are, however, under a genjutsu. With a few simple hand signs, Hinata released them from it, and the two women blinked rapidly before slumping to the floor even more than they already were in a series of sobbing wails. You disrespect the home that you are in. Take advantage of the people that live in this village. Use these women through a means belonging to a ninja. Then ask me to join you. I don't voluntarily kill people. Unless there is no other choice. You are pushing that boundary dangerously close to not being in your favor. If you leave now and take your trash with you, you will live another day, just not here. The rage inside Naruto was teetering on the edge of control. If that wasn't enough, Hinata was imagining the ways she would dissect him while he could still feel everything. The man then pulled the cane that was holding his pant leg down, tossing it aside while standing up. Then I will have to just take what I want. The man went through a few hand motions, trying to push his mind into the two newcomers. Na just stood there feeling a slight pressure at his mind, but it was faint and without effect. This man in front of him had some training, but he would have not even ranked in the academy. This island must be oblivious of the way of the world after the destruction of the island. The thought that even an amateur like this could suppress even a small village spoke a lot about the way in which these people have lived. To them, he must have exhibited some form of magic. It doesn't matter how strong you are. To do this to anyone is inexcusable. The man charged at him, pulling a small sword from the inside of his loose shirt. Na just stood there holding out his hand and gathering chakra. He brought it forward toward the sword and collided with it. The metal began to crack and break under the pressure as Naruto pushed forward, burying the raisin into the man's shoulder. The sheer force of the attack pushed the sleazy man back as the jutsu followed him and sent him through the wall behind him. The man came to a stop against an outside stone wall, slumped and unconscious. Hinata just watched, trying to quiet the sobs of the two women she was looking after. Finally, Naruto turned to her and she could see the despair there at the pain the man had caused these people just because they didn't have any knowledge of the world around them or the teachings of ninja. Her heart was breaking for him. In a low tone, Naruto spoke again, doing his best to sound like his old self. Suki, can you get those two to someone in the village? Maybe they have family here. I'll clean up. Hinata then started to help the women up and led them out of the nightmare. Their sobs were still coming without any signs of stopping. When Hinata could get them to say a word or two, their voices were as if their screams had damaged the vocal cords. Hinata brought them to the main street they had entered from. Is anyone there? These two women were being held in the old Uzumaki house, and they are free to go. Can anyone look after them? They waited there in the deserted street for nearly 5 minutes, thinking that no one would come out to help the broken women until she heard a door open up a few buildings down. Out stepped an old man with a scraggly gray beard and thinning hair on his head. Cautiously, he moved close to where Hinata stood with the women. He never took his eyes off the ground as he reached out and took the two gently by their hands to pull them away. Hinata put on the best smile she could and bowed to the man as they walked away. Thank you, she said. Hinata started on her way back. As she rounded the corner to the compound, she could see Naruto standing in front. He yelled as loud as he could, everyone, the people that kept you in terror out here in a heap of trash, just like they are. It is up to you to decide what you will do with them. They should be unconscious for at least a few hours. Completing his announcement, Naruto turned around and walked back inside, followed by Hinata. Returning to the main room, Hinata noticed that the hole in the wall, which was made by the gang Ida, was now patched up with boards. Okay, we need to see if we can find any information that might help us in the future. The house is still standing, so that might mean not everything has been destroyed. Not being able to control himself from the hurt he felt for the two captives and the villages that had lived in fear, he walked over to Hinata and pulled her into his arms in an embrace that helped calm him. She could feel him shake at the rawness of what they had seen. In truth, she was shaken up about it too, and she needed his support as much as he needed hers. Na reluctantly let go of his love and looked around the room. Can you see if there is anything hidden? Hinata activated her Byakugan and looked around the building. He was right. In a small corner of the floor, a few rooms down, there was a seal imprinted under the floor mats. She led him to the room and moved the mats out of the way. They both stared at the strange symbols. Do you know what it means? Suki-chan. His spirits were being lifted by the discovery. I was never that good at fu and jutsu. Sakura-chan used to have to pack my lunches when we were on Team 7. He hung his head in embarrassment. Hinata giggled a little at the thought of her brave and powerful shinobi being defeated by a piece of sealing paper. Well, it looks like a blood seal, and by the swirl on the center, it seems that only a member of the Uzumaki clan could open it. That is probably why the place is still standing. The seal kept the foundation stable, and whoever rebuilt the house did so with the original pieces that were scattered around. Nodding in agreement, Na bit down on his thumb until a trickle of blood appeared. He smeared it on the seal, slamming his hand down on the seal to pump his chakra into it. The room began to glow, and the floor where the seal originated began to move away. In its place was a stairway that led beneath the home. They gasped at the sight, partially with marvel, but also with a little apprehension. Hand in hand, they proceeded down the stairs, not knowing what awaited them at the bottom. The area was dimly lit, but they could make out the room that they were standing in. It was an entry area with some couches and small tables. But what caught their surprise the most was a library. Scroll after scroll lay on shelves. Hinata and Naruto had never seen anything like it. Even in the libraries in Konoha, there was never this many scrolls. There was quite possibly more scrolls here than in all of Konoha. The room seemed to go on forever. Outwardly, they were excited at the treasure trove of information they were able to find here. Inside, they were cursing about the time it would take to go through it all. Manado, there is just about anything you could want here. It looks like most of these scrolls are sealing scrolls. Hinata started to go through the categories that labeled the shelves. Food, weapons, clothing. It is like you could supply a whole clan and maybe a village with as much stuff that is in here. Hinata took a scroll from one of the shelves, opened it, and applied a little chakra to retrieve the item within. A small puff of smoke, and there sat a small basket of tomatoes. Look, Manado tomatoes. These are probably half a century old, and they look like they were picked this morning. Looking through another set of scrolls that were labeled history, he responded. The Uzumakis were known for their fu and jutsu. As we learned at the academy, they were destroyed for it eventually. They were the ones that designed the original sealing technique for sealing the Bu into people. If my guess is correct, that is why they were destroyed. Hinata looked over at Naruto, knowing it upset him to talk about other gentry. She knew what they were here for, and they would have to be here for a while to go through everything to face the inevitable battle ahead. She actually laughed as she saw Na take a handful of scrolls from the history area. What is so funny him? Na said with a confused look on his face as he teased her with the nickname. Then she lost it. She couldn't help it with him teasing her. Trying to keep him from dropping his scrolls. She leaned over and kissed him lightly. The great hero is facing his worst enemy, homework. He couldn't help it either. He joined her in the amusement of the situation. He set the scrolls to the side and grabbed Hinata by the waist, pulling her close. He kissed her soundly. Her laugh always picked up his spirits. That is one of the greatest reasons for me loving you. Hinata wrapped her arms his neck. You always know how to make me feel better. The sun had already set and the moon was high in the night. Hinata had never seen Naruto study like this before. Most of his training had never come from books or scrolls, but through physical labor. This was different. He was reading non-stop. It was like he was seeking the answers to life's greatest questions, and those scrolls had all the answers. Hinata had spent most of her time searching through supply scrolls, looking for food, possibly weapons that may useful, or even clothing and household goods. To her, it was like the Uzumaki clan of the past had sealed everything and anything just because they could. They knew they would be there for a while, maybe a week or two. So Hinata went to work trying to make their time there as comfortable as possible. She found a near-empty room and some scrolls she thought would work well for this purpose. She almost fell over when she picked up a scroll that said bed on it. They couldn't have, she thought to herself. Most sealed items were usually small enough to easily fit on the paper they were being sealed to, but a whole bed. She laid the scroll on the floor of the now empty room and gave the seal a little chakra push. In a puff of smoke, a large four-post bed appeared before her. It even had clean linen with pillows and intricate designs. All she could think of is how amazing Naruto's ancestors were with their fu and jutsu. Since they had already closed the stairway off, they wouldn't have to worry about being disturbed down below the compound. With that realization, Hinata decided to make it the temporary home. After she was finished with her decorating, she went about trying to find something for dinner. Even though there were servants of the branch families who would do all the cooking in her old home, she did enjoy doing it herself. She had learned by helping in the kitchen when she was not busy with training. Here she found scrolls for more varieties of food than she had ever known. Picking her ingredients carefully, Hinata went on her way to make a stew for Naruto while he skimmed through more scrolls. When she was done making dinner, Hinata decided to take it to Naruto so he could continue his work. Almost at once, when he smelled the food being brought to him, his stomach had growled. It was nearly loud enough to cause Hinata to think that a dog had wandered down into the hideout. As she set the stew with rice in front of Naruto, he reached out to take Hinata by the waist and pull her into hug, so that his head was pressed into her stomach. Thank you, Hinata-chan. I didn't realize how late it was and how hungry I was getting. She pulled away from him and sat down just across from where he was eating so they could have dinner together. That's okay. I understand how much work it is going to be to go through all this. She looked down at a few of the scrolls Naruto had been reading and it surprised her. Naruto-kun, I thought you would be looking through jutsu scrolls trying to learn new techniques, different tactics in combat or to shay. If there may be a forbidden jutsu down here. All of these are history scrolls. History of Usuzu Nunkuni, history of the Uzumaki clan, city development of Azu Shioka and clans of the Whirlpool. Why? Well, it is like the guy that was running the so-called daimyo of this village. He had somehow learned a genjutsu. Obviously, he was not a trained shinobi, but it gave him just enough power over the rest of the village. That is why the people are the way they are. It is not about learning a few powerful moves, but how to use those moves with its greatest effectiveness. It is something I have come to terms with and thought really hard about while I trained on Imtoboku. If I can find a scroll amongst these history scrolls that may tell me how to use a jutsu, what it was used for, and why it was so needed, then perhaps it can be used for the right reasons. He then continued to eat his stew and looked lost. He had something weighing heavy on his mind. Naruto-kun, is everything okay? You look worried, Hinata said, noticing the signs of stress on his face. Yeah. I just need some answers from Kurama. There are some things in the scrolls that I have to confirm, he said with a look that said he would not like the answer when he did get it. Oh. May I come too? We were having weekly meetings with him, and it has been a while since I have seen him, she said with a sense of happiness. With a little bit of hesitation, Na reluctantly agreed, thinking of how much it may hurt her to know of a few of the finer points of his clan, but thought it was her right to know since she was his wife. They finished with dinner, deciding to leave the scrolls for the next day and went off to the bedroom that Hinata had prepared for them. They sat on the bed facing each other while Na gently placed his hands on the sides of Hinata's face. Hinata and Na stood in front of the sealed cage that held Kurama. Red eyes slowly began to open at their presence. Kit, I see you have returned. You too is well, Hyuga-san. It is always a pleasure to see you. I can also tell you have made it finally. Congratulations for choosing wisely, Kit. She will make an excellent mother. As if Hinata wasn't blushing enough, Naruto joined in too with his face turning a bright red. To their reaction, Kurama let out a growling laugh. Hinata bowed in response to the fox's acknowledgement of her. It is good to see you as well, Kurama-sama. That is enough embarrassingness, furball. I need answers, Naruto said, trying to get his head on straight after thinking about Hinata having his kids. I will answer what I can, Kurama said with an annoyed tone. You know the Uzumakis created the sealing jutsu that holds you in, don't you? Na was trying to run through all the facts he had read in the scrolls. Yes, in fact, All the beasts that are sealed into containers originate from the developments of the Fujutsu that the Uzumakis created. The fox stated matter-of-factly. This was a scary thought that Naruto had when he thought about what might happen if he dies. Do you also know that only someone from the Uzumaki clan is strong enough to hold your chakra at bay? I do. I think I know where you're going with this, Kit, but I will allow you to ask the next question anyways, just to see the look on your face. The grin was ever widening on the fox's muzzle. Hinata finally got where Naruto was going, and tears appeared in her eyes. If they decided to have children, then one of them would be forced to carry the burden he has. Na would have to choose one of his own children to suffer his fate. Pushing through his fears, he asked despite the coldness that Kurama was showing him, if I was to die, in order to contain you, I would have to place you in one of my newborn children whose chakra systems are undeveloped, so it would accept your chakra disruption. There it was, the low guttural chuckle from the demon himself, followed by, yes, Kit. That would be the reality of it. The fox then looked over at Hinata, who was on the verge of a breakdown while Naruto's anger was apparent all over his face. It does not always have to be as such though. Although someone of Uzumaki blood must be used to contain Midu their natural chakra flows, it does not mean that it has to be someone of a young age. A glimmer of hope appeared in Naruto's eyes. So you are telling me that the age of the Uzumaki does not matter? That is right. Infants like you and Maito were used. Your mother was a child when I was placed in her. The conditions for that reside only within me. If I will it, I could be placed in someone who was in their 30s to 40s. I control the intermingling of the chakra, Kurama said as if pondering the idea and formulating a plan. During my confinement, when I was forced into my container, fighting was the only option. In trying to escape the inevitable, my chakra would be released into the new container. If the chakra system was already developed, it would kill the host. Would you ever willingly allow yourself to be transferred to another container? Hinata spoke now. She knew that if Na and she had children, one of their children would have to bear the weight of being a genturi. She didn't know if she could stand by as witness to her child being treated as Naruto had been while he was growing up. Kurama laughed again. Why would I voluntarily walk into my own prison when all I seek is my freedom? You humans ask much of those who are above you. Naruto filed that information away for later. He would have to deal with that when the time came. He looked over at Hinata this time as he asked the question, how long does the Uzumaki live? From what I can tell from the scrolls, they can live 100 years or more. Hinata looked at Naruto, not really knowing why this was on his mind. Due to the increase of the Uzumaki chakra stored with added endurance, they have also been gifted with long life. While sealed within Mido, there were members of your clan that had been known to live to 150 years. Kurama seemed just as lost as Hinata was at where Naruto was going with this. Na then asked the question that would reveal why this concerned him. Still looking at Hinata, he said, is there a way to extend the life of someone? Not making him immortal, but let's say to live as long as an Uzumaki. It hit Hinata like a ton of bricks. Her lifespan was like any other person, but she couldn't live as long as his clan once had. Naruto was asking if there was a way to extend her life to match that of his own. As you well know, there are many techniques that shinobi have used to extend their lives. As you should remember your encounter with Kakazu, he was living during the time when Konoha was first formed. He even battled with the first Hokage. What is the point of extending your life if you lose your soul in the process? He stole other people's hearts to increase his life. Naruto snapped back. That is only but one way to gain long life. Kurama snickered in response. I will leave you with this to think about for now. The answer you seek may only be in front of you. Na and Hinata sat there on the bed and they thought about what Kurama had just said. Now you know what was bothering me. I found out through those scrolls one read. I noticed the same names appear as the author over many decades. It was a hypothesis, but one I needed to know. It warmed Hinata's heart that he was looking to ensure that they spent as much of their life together as possible. Na, I would love to be able to spend a long life such as yours with you, but this may not be doable. We are talking about finding a way to extend my life by nearly 100 years without the loss of someone else's life. He took her by the hand and looked deep into her pale eyes. I'm sorry I never noticed what you felt for me. It took me too long to see your concern and encouragement for me as the development of your love to me, never to have me give you any back. Now that I know, I love you more than I thought I ever could love anybody. I want to find a way to make up for the time that we lost. Then he said with a seductive smile, besides, if we get to be in each other's arms for the next 50 years, imagine what we could do with another 100 years. You wouldn't want me with all the wrinkles after another 100 years, Hinata said in a teasing manner. Na leaned up to her ear and whispered, as if there was anyone else in the area that could hear them. Well, then I guess I will have to make the most of the time by memorizing every inch of your soft and smooth skin. He then dipped his head to her neck and ran his teeth along her skin, ending in a kiss. Hinata let a small eep escape her mouth at the surprise advancement of her new lover before she relaxed and let the waves of pleasure from his touch wash over her. They made love that night in a more relaxed manner, taking more time to explore each other and how they made each other feel. It had been 3 days since they locked themselves under the Uzumaki compound. Na had gone through almost every history scroll he could find. He was working on his sealing techniques with Hinata's help. She had a lot of chakra control and a lot of the more complicated seals required more focus for him to accomplish. Although he was far from mastering any part of Fujitsu, he was getting the hang of the smaller seals. He could seal small foods and items. He tried to seal his shoes one time only to have it fly back in his face. This immediately sent Hinata to the floor laughing and clutching her sides. Hinata busied herself looking over all the sealing scrolls that contained items from the past. She ultimately set them in categories of use and do not use. The do not use were the ones that pertained to Naruto's clan, and she wanted to save them for later when he would have time to enjoy them. There were also weapons and artifacts she wished to keep sealed. The ones she did use only pertained to making their time there more comfortable, such as linen and food when they needed it. Aside from looking through a window to the past, they sat and talked for hours, always making sure to eat together. Every night since their first day have had talks with the nine-tailed beast, needing more questions answered. The one question that Kurama would never answer was the one about extending life. Na didn't want to live forever and more than likely wouldn't live more than another decade or two with the Ishin he set for himself. However, in the event that he did live a full life that the Uzumakis were known for, then he wanted Hinata right there beside him the whole time. While looking through some sealed training scrolls one morning, Hinata had asked him to unseal their hideaway. She was feeling a little cramped down in the recesses of the earth and wanted to stretch her legs a little. It wasn't 5 minutes before he heard Hinata's voice calling from the top of the stairs that led to the house above. Manado, I need you up here right now. That was all she said, and immediately Naruto was worried. He dropped everything he had in his hands and dashed to the top of the steps to see Hinata standing there alone. Suki, what's the matter? He said as he reached the top of the steps out of breath. Hinata took Naruto by the hand and started to walk toward the front doors. I think we may have a problem. She opens the doors in front of them and it gave way to a sight he never expected to see. Just inside the compound walls, there were more than 50 people, mainly men, some young boys and women on their hands and knees. They were bowing for what Naruto could not tell. Trying to figure out what was going on, he just openly said, hoping for answers, may I help you? An old man, Hinata recognized him as the man who took the 2 young women that she had taken back to the market area, looked up from his position, and said in a feeble tone, Lord, please treat us well. Now, this really confused Na. What were they talking about? Please stand up, which they all did as best they could, but didn't move from the area. Can someone please tell me what is going on? The old man stepped forward and spoke once again to try to explain what was happening. Lord, you have defeated and driven out the old lord. Therefore, you are now the ruler of this island. All we ask is that you treat us fair and kind. In return, we will give you all that we can. This was too much for Na, and Hinata couldn't believe what she was seeing. Na tried his best to process it. He had always wanted to be a Hogue, but he wasn't here to lead or rule people. He was here to learn his family secrets, to find a way to defeat his enemies and save the people of other nations along with Konoha. Speaking of which, where is that other guy that was staying here? We did what you instructed. We sent him and his men the way of the trash. Him and his group were put on a small boat and sent out to sea, the old man answered, scratching the back of his head. Well, Then, problem solved. You don't have anything to worry about. You're welcome. He spoke the last with a question in his voice, as though unsure whether to offer the sentiment. The elderly gentleman then spoke in an uncertain tone. For as long as we can remember, there has always been a lord over these lands. If you do not take the position that is rightfully yours, we will surely suffer. Hinata stepped forward, knowing how Naruto was about being a little obtuse when it came to handling information. Minato-kun, these people are asking you to be their leader. They have been under oppression for so long. They cannot seem to function without someone as the figurehead. I got that. It is just that we are not planning on staying here. We came here to get information on how I might be able to learn what has happened in the past. As you saw from those scrolls down there, it gives a greater insight against this Materai, since this land was so close politically with Konoha. He is supposed to be from the founding of Konoha. Besides, if we stay here, there is a greater chance we will be found. Acknowledging that their freedom came at a cost. We can't just leave them like this. They have no formal sense of government, and it looks like they don't even know about the world outside this island. Most of these people look as though they haven't had a good meal in years, Hinata said, noticing the malnutrition on the older and younger men. Then Hinata's eyes beamed with thought. How long do you think it will take us to go through that library? Probably about 3 months to sort through it all. Maybe a little more if we stay to actually try going through the Jutsu scrolls, he said, trying to understand what Hinata was thinking. How about we help them while we are here? The least we can do is teach them to stand on their own, she said, thinking of a way to help the people that looked like they needed more than just removal from an oppressive environment. Na stood there for a few moments and thought to himself. He knew this was going to take a while, but as he looked across the people standing in front of him, he couldn't deny that they needed the assistance. He hated seeing the people suffer to such a degree, and they would be here for some time. Okay, we will help them re-establish their village, though. We still have a lot of work to do. Somewhere in a far-off place, in the dark recesses of a building where no light shone due to the lack of windows, A.M. An walked at a brisk pace. Hatred and disgust were more than dripping from the look on the man's face. All his efforts had been wasted. The years planning, moving people in the right direction. The manipulation was non-stop, and if it wasn't for his superior intellect, he would have never come so close to realizing his true desired potential. He wanted the head of the man that screwed it all up. As he reached closer to his destination, he could hear 2 people talking. One sounded livid and outright determined to defy the other. Not caring about the niceties, the man charged in and confronted his target. What the hell happened, you mask-wearing weirdo? A man in an orange mask with one hole for the right eye to see through turned and looked at the newcomer. Danzo-san, it is so nice of you to drop by. You are just in time to help me with something. I'm not going to help you with anything. I've helped you enough. And what do I have for it? Nothing. I am supposed to be Hokage by now. That was the deal, right? I get you the demon child, the intelligence on the inner workings of the place, and critical targets. You can't even pull off your end of the deal, he said in a tone not unlike that of a child who was denied candy. Well, Danzo, that deal won't work anymore. The Kyuubi is dead now, so all that you have done does not matter to me anymore. It may take decades for the Kyuubi chakra to mold itself into a physical form again, Toby said in a bored tone. Rage encircled the man who felt he had been denied his right. Like hell, it doesn't work. You get back there and finish off the that's in my seat. You owe me at least that language. Danzo, there are children present. Toby motioned to Sasaki, who Danzo just recognized and noticed. Why is this kid here? He asked with a disdain over the Unia standing mere feet from him. Toby started to walk away and explained. He is here for the same reason you're here, Danzo, to get a sense of closure. As he reached the door, he addressed the swordsman. I know I asked you to wait for a while until we can get the 9-tailed beast back, but this may help relieve some of that revenge you're holding, Sasaki. Danzo there was the one that ordered the extermination of your clan. Toby chuckled a little as he closed the door to screams of horror. Na sat on the beach just outside the budding village of Usuzu-shioka. He would come out to the beach often late at night to clear his head and take in the scenery. It was one of the most relaxing and beautiful sights he had ever witnessed. It has been 4 months since they agreed to help the villages rebuild and become accustomed to living without oppression. It wasn't easy at first, and they would more than likely have difficulty in the future. Unfortunately, he and Hinata had to leave in the morning. And while Na sat there, he thought of all the great times he had with the villagers. Day 1, Na looked over the people he had just agreed to help. And they all had a buzzed look on their faces. Not even knowing what he was going to do, he brought his hand up to his head as he tried to think of an orderly process to getting things accomplished while still trying to get the research and training done that they had come for. Right, the first thing we need to do is get everyone that lives here together. That way, you will all know what is going on. He addressed everyone inside the compound. Na looked over at Hinata for some support. She gently smiled and nodded, and he found it comforting even though they were facing a daunting task. Meet us on the market street in 1 hour with everyone, please. With that, everyone in the compound turned and walked away. When they were out of sight, he looked back at Hinata again. You know this is going to be troublesome. I mean, we are talking about trying to help these people rebuild a whole village and become capable of defending it. He suddenly thought about what his friend Shikamaru would do under this task. Hinata reached out and placed her hand in his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Everything will be fine. You inspire people like no other I have ever seen. You inspire me. She leaned over and gave him a peck on the cheek. I don't know anything about running a village. I hope to learn that on my way to becoming Hokage. I'm just a genin right now. I know nothing of politics or policies other than the ones I would break while playing pranks on everyone, He stated, realizing the weight he had just placed on himself. I can help you. Have you already forgotten that I was the heir to one of the most prestigious clans in Konoha? I did have to play politics from time to time, and I remember a lot from my studies about the intricacies of villages and what is needed to make one run. How about you focus on the rebuilding and training of the villagers? She said with a sympathetic voice, one with encouragement that he couldn't just deny. I don't know, but if this is what you want to do, we will try. I do have to admit it though, I would feel more comfortable if they were better off than what it looks like. No, remembering back to the day they walked up the market street for the first time. Hand in hand, they started to walk to the market street to wait for the villagers to gather. We still have to get our work done too, you know. I know, as long as we are together, we can get it all done. She stopped him briefly so she could embrace him with a kiss, knowing this is who he was meant to be. They waited at the end of the market street and were discussing how they would help the people rebuild. The only knowledge they had is of their old home, and a lot of the ideas they were agreeing on were modeled after Konoha. After a short while, people started coming out into the street. And when Naruto or Hinata tried to greet them, everyone would shy away as if fear had been ingrained in them. As more and more people came, they could see an aura of depression, giving the entire area a gray hue. After the hour had passed, the elderly gentleman, who was now known as a Guri, told the couple that everyone from the village was present. Na stood there for a moment, thinking he would rather take another swing at pain than have to face the melancholy crowd in front of him. The population of the village was a lot larger than they originally thought, roughly 500 people. In the best voice he could muster, he addressed the crowd. Hello everyone. Realizing his voice had a pinch of stage fright. My name is Manado-sei and this is my wife Suki. As you know, we did kick out the old lord that was ruling over you. We are not here to do such a thing as rule over you. We came only to find some information and then we will be on our way. Once we do, you will be on your own. We did offer to help you, though, and if you would like, there is a lot we can teach you. He stopped there, thinking of how much of an idiot he must sound like to these people. Here was a 16-year-old kid telling a whole village, a recently lauded free village, that he will help them to be free from what they just went through. He looked across the crowd and wondered if he even sounded like a leader or a Hokage. There was no reaction from anyone. It looked like a street of life-sized dolls. We will separate into 2 groups. One group will be of the people that know about this village, any you all look up to as authority figures. The next group will be everyone else. Na looked down at Aguri as he was the only one they had talked to since they had been here. Aguri-san, can you gather the first group? I need everyone that has a working knowledge of the community of this village. Aguri walked through the crowd of people and started selecting people. The people that he spoke with came forward to stand in front of Naruto and Hinata. Once Aguri returned, There were 15 people who were now going to be a deciding factor for the whole village. Naruto looked to Hinata. How are we going to get these people up to speed on being a council? Just as Na said it, the idea hit him. He placed his hands making the correct symbol and stated, Kage Bush and no Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a clone stood beside him. Right then, he noticed the look of horror spread across everyone's face. They really never have seen shinobi before. He thought to himself, it's okay. It's just a jutsu, a clone I created of myself, so I can send him to get some things. Still, the look didn't change on their faces. He withdrew a kunai from his hip pouch, twirled it with one finger, and with one stroke popped the clone. Their reaction changed a little from shock to a little amazement. Na summoned one more and he sent it off to the Uzumaki basement to gather some things. While they waited, Naruto addressed the people once more. These 15 people here will now be known as your council. They will be the ones you speak with if you have any problems or concerns for yourselves or village. We can teach you what life is like outside of the village, how to defend yourselves, and how to train. Just then, the clone arrived again with several scrolls that Na took and started looking through. One by one, he handed them to Hinata. These are some of the scrolls one already read through. They hold the village history, political structure that was here before and the city prints for what this place used to look like. While you are handling the political side and explaining how governments are currently set up, you can have the scrolls to use as an example. Hinata beamed at him with adoration. She knew he was a little uncomfortable with speaking to these people on the spot, but he was showing the best possible leadership he could. He had even thought that maybe these documents from their past would help give them some pride in the village they called home. That is a great idea, Minato-kun. I need your help with something before you start working with the council, Na said. Sure, what is it? Hinata replied. Na gazed across the crowd. They need fighters if they are going to last longer than a month after we leave. Can you use your eyes to check for any chakra levels that would be considered above civilian? Hinata activated her Bakugan and started walking through the crowd and started looking at everyone's chakra networks. When she found someone with a decent amount of chakra or above, she asked him to step off to one side. Then she saw the strangest thing. Manon, come here, please. Na rushed over and stopped beside Hinata. What is it? Hinata whispered in his ear, and Naruto looked down at a woman's legs. No, she whispered something else. He looked at the woman who now instinctively placed a hand behind her left leg and it was resting on something that was not there. Mom, may I ask you what your name is, please? The woman started to back up slightly and responded, please don't hurt her. She can't control it sometimes. It happens when she is scared. Lady, I'm not here to hurt you, your daughter, or anyone in this village. I'm just here to help. He was getting tired of trying to assure people that he didn't want to hurt anyone. Na leaned down and held out his hand to the small child that wasn't there. Hello, you can come out. We won't hurt you, he said with the biggest smile he could show. He waited for a few moments and the mother looked down with a smile and nod. Suddenly, he felt the small hand of a child touch his hand. In a shimmer, the hand belonged to began to appear in front of Naruto as if she was a phantom. The sight was nearly as creepy as Yumoto-sensei, and Naruto had to control his reaction. So she wouldn't hide again. Naruto looked back up at Hinata. It's a Keki Genka and a really rare one at that. I've never seen anyone that could do something like this, have you? No, I've never seen anyone that could do something like that. It has never been recorded in anything that we were ever taught, Hinata said in amazement. He then looked at the mother. Can you do that, too? The woman looked around to the people standing there, trying to avoid the gaze. Na knew that look from his childhood. It was a look that she was different and the villagers didn't understand. He placed his hand or her forearm. It's okay. There is nothing wrong with it. She gave a little smile to Na and nodded and then she disappeared from sight. It was as if she shimmered for a fraction of a second and then wasn't there at all. Manon, she is still standing there, Hinata said, confirming what Naruto had suggested. Then there was another shimmer and she reappeared. Na jumped a little. That was so cool. What an amazing bloodline trait. Quickly you two go stand over there. You would be perfect. They did as he asked for what they did not know. Hinata continued through the crowd and when they had finished they had about 50 people who would be the best candidates. For shinobi training. After they reached the front again, Naruto addressed the people. Everybody. The council will be leaving to meet with Suki so they can learn what it means to be a village so they can best serve you. The people over here, he gestured to the soon-to-be village shinobi force, will be starting their training to learn how to defend your homes. The rest of you will start to rebuild the damage from years of neglect. Aside from the council, you will all begin tomorrow, starting here at sunrise. Enjoy the rest of your day and say goodbye to the life you knew. With that, everyone bowed to him and started dispersing. He half expected a cheer for what he was willing to do, but passed it off due to the lives of servitude they were accustomed to. Present time, Hinata found Hana sitting on the beach, and she decided to join him by sitting on his lap to get his attention. She wrapped her arms around her neck and kissed him lightly on the lips. We don't have to go if you don't want to. We could stay here. This has been the greatest time we have ever had since we left our home. That's the problem. This isn't our home, he said with a sense of sadness in his heart. She reached up and gently pulled his face to meet her eye to eye. It could be Naruto-kun. The world thinks we are dead. The news we got from the port town and the land of waves all say the same thing. There has been no movement toward war from Ma. He is probably waiting for Kurama's chakra to remanifest itself. Even if there was no threat of anyone coming for him, there was something else that bothered him. But these people do not know who I am. It is not right to them. We have done a good job of getting these people ready to be a village. I don't want to impose on them without them knowing who I am. Hinata smiled and it melted him inside. They do know who you are. You are strong and give them hope for their future. The same hope and determination that you have given me. Your name makes no difference to the man they see in you. They look to you for strength and protection. You are always too oblivious to see those that care for you. She then leaned in to kiss him deeper than previously. He returned it just as aggressively as she did while thinking about the first time he protected the budding village. 1 month into the rebuild, Na walked along the beach while the sun was just starting to rise. There were stars still in the sky and a hint of purple coming over the horizon that marked morning. He liked this spot. It was calm and serene, giving him a good place to think over how he would train the new shinobi for the day. Most of the time, he would train them in taijutsu and proper team tactics. He was never good at explaining the workings of Enjutsu as he always just did what he was asked and molded chakra as he was told. Genjutsu was nearly out of the question. He just didn't have the concentration for it. To help get around this, Hinata would help him train the villagers for an hour or two when she wasn't busy with the council. She had excellent chakra control and could easily get them to start the basics of what they were taught in the academy. He looked out over the water and saw a large vessel that hopefully would assist the village in trade. In their first week, they sent out a small boat with some men to request assistance in the trade of goods and services from the land of waves and the port town in the land of fire. Much to Naruto's delight, some ships had come to offer commerce, with some of the sailors wishing to stay on the island to start a new life. Some would leave only to return with their families to take up residence in the new village. By this time, the village had already acquired an additional 200 people. This allowed reconstruction work to progress a lot faster. Getting back to his thoughts on the day's training schedule, Naruto walked on, just staring off into the retreating night sky. Something started to feel a little off at that moment when he heard it. Sweden water shockwave. Na turned to where he heard the sound as it came from the direction of the boat, but the boat was no longer there. A large wave of water was obstructing its view and would most likely damage the beach and create flooding in the beachside houses and businesses. Thinking quickly, Na stood in its path and flipped through hand signs as fast as possible. Photon air bullet. A large concentrated burst of air erupted from Naruto's mouth and impacted the oncoming wave, sending it in the other direction. When the water receded, the boat was again in view, but he now saw was more alarming. Men were coming from the water. Naruto would guess there was around 15 of them rapidly approaching. From his time spent traveling with Jiraiya, he had heard stories of the potential dangers to towns and villages. T resided near the oceans. Pirates, shouts, and commands were coming from the invaders. Sweden water whip. Sweden water gun. Sweden water trumpet. The jutsu were coming in fast along with kana and shurikens. Na took off running, attempting to dodge each attack while reaching into his tool pouch. He withdrew a handful of kana and started letting them fly. One of the projectiles lodged itself into the neck of one of the attackers. He waited till the attackers started to reach the beach before engaging as many as he could. The first one reached the sand and Nero sprang into action. With a running slide, he kicked the foot of his first opponent out from under him, following it up with a rolling kick to his abdomen before launch. Ing the man back into the water. Springboarding back to his feet, he went after the next opponent. Running through hand signs, futon, windy bee blade jutsu. The attack cleaved the man in half before Naruto reached him. He continued on to the next person approaching. The two combatants went through a flurry of punches and kicks, trying to own up each other in the hopes for an opening. When Naruto finally saw an opening, he face-planted the man into the sand. Sweden water bullet. Knowing he wasn't going to be able to dodge in time, Na just braced for impact. It hit him full force. He tried to roll with it and eventually landed in a kneeling position. He took a second to recover from the dizziness and the eventual headache as sharp pain went through his left shoulder. A kunai had pierced his shoulder blade and the pain was ripping through his arm. Na quickly pulled the object out of his shoulder, then looked on as the attackers continued moving towards him. Sweden twin dragons rising. He saw two water dragons then slam into the men closest to him. Then he saw Hinata running behind his attackers, coming to his defense. She had developed her skills greatly studying the water-based jutsu in the scrolls they found in the Uzumaki library. As she ran to the man closest to her, Naruto could see the Byakugan activated and her hands glowed as she entered her gentle fist style of fighting. She engaged the man and killed him in a single blow with a Juken strike to the throat. Not stopping with the least amount of momentum loss, Hinata launched into the air, roundhouse kicking the next one she encountered. Two men, noticing there was another person defending the village, went to engage her. She fought with a fluidity that would remind him of a whip of water or snake as she modified her gentle fist, taking advantage of her extreme flexibility. Not wanting to be outdone by the slender Hyuga, Naruto got to his feet and re-engaged the invaders that were still coming for him. He knew he couldn't use his signature jutsu as that would give evidence to who he was. Even summoning a toad would be a dead giveaway. He ducked a punch from a man that had just reached him. Na went on the defensive as his left arm was damaged and would likely affect his use of taijutsu. He was literally fighting with one hand tied behind his back. He needed something that would allow him to take an offensive. Rengen would give him away as well as clones. He thought of everything he had in his arsenal. Naruto's eyes lit up as he remembered the scrolls he was now studying. A plan came to mind. He had never seen these used in combat situations, but he was willing to try. His right hand started to glow as he dodged punches and kicks, not to mention the kunai and shurikens. He waited for his opponent to get close enough. Sidestepping the left hook the man threw. Naruto brought up his glowing hand and grabbed the man's head. Fu and Jutsu Demon's Nightmare Seal. A seal appeared on the man's face. The man fell limp to the ground, gripping his head. Horrified screams came from his mouth and soon died down as the man just stared into his hands. It was a large drain on Naruto's chakra system, but it was effective. Two more pirates were coming at him fast. Naruto's hands still glowed, and he palmed the ground in front of him. Fu and Jutsu binding sands. The men stopped in their tracks as their feet froze in place. They were stuck there with the sand holding them in place. There were 7 invaders left as Naruto looked for the next target. Hinata was still defending and striking her 2 assailants, and there were still 2 more trying to get near her, with 3 coming at him. A kunai seemed to appear out of thin air near Hinata. Naruto thought it was aimed at her until it zoomed past her head and lodged itself into the right eye of one of the men attacking her, killing him instantly. Looking behind Hinata for the thrower, he found no one was there. That was until he saw small footsteps being pushed into the sand. The little girl that took a shine to him was there to help defend her village. Another kana shimmered into existence and planted itself into the shoulder of another man as he reached Hinata. Sweden water bullet brought him back to his own attackers as a large blast of water was barreling down at him. Na back flipped several times as he retreated from the impact area and threw 2 more kunai at his attacker where they were deflected. He ran at the man and propelled himself off his opponent's leg when the attacker made a mid-sweeping kick. Landing behind the man, Naruto ducked, knowing a roundhouse elbow was sure to follow as the pirate turned around to face the blonde. As Na came back up, he placed his glowing fingers on the man's stomach. Fu and Jutsu Chakra Seal. The man collapsed unconscious. Na turned back around as he knew there should be two more nearing him quickly and was surprised as he saw a man from the village with a sword cross slashing through one of the invader's chest. The other pirate was lying on the ground from the fatal impact of a large stone that was shot at him from another village defender's Enjutsu. All that remained were the two still fighting with Hinata. Naruto started to make a mad dash toward her when the scene played out in front of him. One of the men already lay dead, apparently from multiple kunai being lodged into his chest. He then noticed Hinata had her arm drawn back and was bringing it forward. Na just listened to the most beautiful voice he had ever known as she dealt the final invader the finishing blow. Rengen, most of the villagers that had been watching from the edge of the beach started to come down to see what had happened. Now, majority of the pirates were dead, although Na wanted to make sure he left some alive as an added caution. The two villagers that assisted Naruto and the little girl who was the first to come to their aid started to make their way to Naruto with Hinata not far behind. While they were approaching, Naruto went to the two attackers that were stuck to the sand and laughed at the sight. Their feet weren't the only things stuck now, but their knees, hands, and even one of them had his face stuck to the sand. He called over the two who helped him and then released the seal, allowing the pirates free. Keep an eye on these two. Take them to gather what they can of the dead and grab whatever bodies you can. After that, meet me by the water. With his left shoulder already healing, he grabbed the man who would be in a constant nightmare and the other which had his entire chakra system sealed by the IR collars as he dragged them down to the water. Hinata even picked up the guy she had hit with the ringan and was carrying him. The man must have fallen hard as his neck hung at an odd angle. It was broken and he too was dead. As they gathered by the beach, they all began to walk on the water out to the boat from where the pirates had come, planning to send them back on their way. Addressing the only two left standing, Naruto said, "This is Azu Nunkuni. The capital here is Usuzu Shioka, and it is protected. When you reach wherever you are going and meet others that may wish to attack it, you tell them this. It will cost them more than a few men. Your men were even defeated by an 8-year-old girl." One of the attackers looked back to the beach to see a small girl jumping up and down, waving at them. The sight of such a small child killing them sent shivers down his spine. They lifted the dead and living back onto the boat and the two villagers started back for the shore. When the boat was ready to leave, Na went through a series of hand signs, futon, air bullet. And with that, he created a gust of wind that sent the boat away from the island at great speeds. Hinata and Naruto started to walk back to the village. She grabbed a hold of his arm and leaned her head on his shoulder. He looked down with a raised eyebrow and a slight grin on his face as he said, "Show off. Bet you're pretty proud to have mastered that now, aren't you?" She lifted her head and kissed his cheek with a slight blush. "I had to show my sensei that all the time and effort he put into my training wasn't for nothing." He gave her a kiss on the top of her head as she laid it back down on his shoulder, taking a minute to breathe her in. He could smell the flower scent of herbal shampoo, but there was a hint of the sea in it from the fight they just had near the water. As they reached the beach, the villagers stood there until Naruto and Hinata approached them. At once, the village and all its inhabitants erupted into cheers. They stood there in awe of the adoration they were receiving when something like this was nothing out of the ordinary if you were to take a snapshot from their lives training and doing missions in the past. Present, it was getting late into the night. They needed to get back to the compound to prepare for the departure tomorrow. They would be continuing their training in secret for the battles that needed to be dealt with in the future. He lifted Hinata up and let her feet touch the sand before they continued on their way into the village for the last time. Hinata broke the silence. "Have you talked to Kurama-sama about what he thinks we should do, stay or go?" "Not since that one time when you were there," he said with an impassive tone. "Well, at least you made a friend with the QB," Hinata said with a smile. Almost laughing, he responded, "I don't know if I would call it a friendship. Let's just say we have an alliance of sorts, but he is a lot happier now with his new surroundings, and the chance to train with him has been a bonus." Last month, Naruto and Hinata had pored through the history scrolls more times than they could remember, and they saw a pattern that started since the founding of the shinobi world. There was a direct correlation with the patterns in Konoha. Even the Uzumaki clan and Uzununi were involved. They needed to speak to the Kyuubi and try to get some answers and details that only the beast would know. That night before turning in, They entered Naruto's mindscape for that reason alone. There, Naruto and Hinata stood in front of the sealed gate that contained the demon fox. Kurama, I need some answers, Naruto said with a raised tone that demanded attention. From behind the bars, two large red eyes popped open as a growling and menacing voice spoke. Watch how you speak to me, Kit. There will be a time that I am free of this prison, and if I do not receive your respect, I will tear you apart. Yeah, Furball, we were reading through the history scrolls, and we know that you were there for all the attacks on Konoha. You were sealed into Mido Uzumaki on your first attempt to destroy the village. Why would you target that specific village? Why should I tell you? This information is not relevant now, the fox said as if he wouldn't divulge his past as it was a reminder of how he became imprisoned in a human to begin with. Realizing that Kurama was in one of his moods again, Naruto knew he wouldn't get any answers without giving something in return. How about we come to an agreement? You tell me what I want to know. No secrets from the things I ask, and I will give you a little freedom. Hinata looked at Naruto in shock. He wouldn't release the fox just to get some information. Would he? Kurama spoke the words that Hinata had already thought. You would not release the seal for something so trivial. Na stood there and shook his head. No, but I can give you some room to stretch out. Na closed his eyes and concentrated. He brought up his hands and pushed outwards with what looked like force. This caused the walls to be pushed back into what looked like black nothingness. The lights were dim with the exception of the glow of the bars and the red shine coming from the fox's eyes. He then brought his hands back together like he was crumpling up a piece of paper, and the bars of the cage collapsed in on themselves. They too could not be seen. Even the seal had vanished from sight. Now Hinata and Naruto stood in the darkness with the eyes of the fox piercing down on them. This caused Hinata to panic a little until she heard Naruto clap twice. Then there was an explosion of color. Hinata had to close her eyes to let them adjust to the extreme light. When she opened them, they were standing in a green field with rolling hills. Along the edges in the distance were trees that made up a forest surrounding the field. In the center on top of the hill near where they stood was a small cluster of trees with one enormous tree in the center. Just in front of them stood the demon fox low into the ground before it stretched to its full height. After it took in the scenery, it noticed there was nothing in its way from getting at Na. Na just stood there with his eyes open looking at Hinata. And the fox reached back with one of its massive paws with the claws outstretched and brought it across Na. Na. Hinata screamed as she knew the hit would kill him instantly. As she saw the whole thing, she almost lost it until she noticed the large claw passed right through him. Now knock that off, fuzzball. You try that again, and I'll put you back in that cage. He spoke as if he was talking to a child. The QB stood there in astonishment while it tried to figure out what had just happened. With tears ready to fall from her eyes, Hinata asked, how? Na just smiled at her again. What you saw before was a construct that I had grown accustomed to. That was how Kurama saw his prison in me. When I was unaware that the fox was sealed in me, his will was stronger than my own. His view dominated what I thought of his surroundings. I just accepted it. But this is my mind, and I can make his prison whatever I wish it to be. Na noticed the fox was hanging on his every word. For the time being, if he accepts my offer, I will keep it like this, and he can roam and stretch all he likes. The sun will continuously shine, or it can be dark as night. With that thought, Naruto concentrated a little as the sky shifted to show a moon and a starry sky. But he hit you, which should have killed you. Hinata said in bewilderment, he can't hurt us here, just like we can't hurt him. Well, not physically. As I said, it is my will that controls this place. As long as I remain in control of my own mind and I am aware of this place, then nothing can happen unless I wish it. Think of it like a dream that you make up yourself, he said as a matter of fact. Then the fox tried again, this time just trying to push one claw through Naruto's back. Na looked back at him. I said, knock it off. Weren't you listening? Greatly relieved, Hinata asked one more question. What about the seal that keeps him in? Naruto took Hinata by the hand and led her to the small crop of trees on top of the hill. The seal is fine. It too is a construct, just an image and a reminder to the fox that it is sealed. But I kind of liked it. So I placed it on the large tree in the center of this small crop. The real seal the fox could never get to, as it is on the outside of me and imprinted into the skin on my stomach. I found the scroll detailing the seal's design, and it had additional notes for the interactions with the QB. Naruto pointed to the trunk of the large tree, and there was the construct of the seal nailed to its massive trunk. Na turned around and addressed the fox. Do we have a deal? Or do you get crammed in a hat box? Na thought briefly again, and the sun came out as the sky turned blue again. Kurama stood there for a minute or two, thinking about it. This was a better change in scenery than the one before. There was enough room here for him to actually run. Not at full speed, but a decent workout still. His tails waved through the air as if they were alive on their own, and it felt good to have them move around like that again. We have an agreement, Kit. What would you like to know? They all talked for what seemed like hours, about his imprisonment in Mido, the battle with the first Hokage, and even Naruto's mother. They talked about Madara and what his ambitions were. He evidently wanted revenge on Konoha for his abandonment and exile from the Uchiha clan. All of the great shinobi wars were started by Moa for power in one form or another. The first war was evident through the use of clans conquered by the Uchiha and fought with the Senju of Konoha after its founding. Ng. Usuzu Nunkuni was destroyed during the Second War as Moa sought information on how to remove a biju from its container. The seal designers of Usuzu Shioka made the demon binding seal that held the tailed beast in. The Third War was created to lure out the container only to find it in a small girl that was well protected. Moa would have to wait until he could get another chance, and that happened the night Naruto was born. His path this time may be different, though, as he is not only seeking the QB, but the other tailed beasts as well. With this revelation, Kurama had agreed to assist Naruto in the use of his chakra, as he never wanted to be used by a mere human like a puppet for their enjoyment or wanting destruct. On a whim. Moa had done it twice in the past, and he would rather suffer a fate locked in Naruto than be under a human's control again. If by any chance Naruto would defeat Moa, Kurama still vowed to get free from the container he was in. When Naruto asked Kurama about the decision on moving and traveling again, he simply stated, "It matters not to me where you go. But the question you wish to ask is it safe to stay in this village to live? As long as Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga are dead, there is no reason to fear any pursuit." Present, the couple had reached the newly refurbished compound and began to get ready for bed. The villagers had insisted on bringing it back to its former glory as a way of gratitude for helping the villa. GE gained the strength it needed to stand again. Naruto had at first tried to convince them otherwise since they would be leaving soon, but they would not listen and did it anyways. Thoughts of the short life in the village ran through his mind. It was about to end and there was adventure on the horizon. He was excited to travel like he had done with his former teacher, Jiraiya. At the same time, he had grown to make loyal and trustworthy friends. As they lay in each other's arms for the night, they put the past and worry over the future aside. Living in the now, they made love passionately, as it would be the last time, unless it was under the stars or in the bed of an inn. The next morning, they had packed the things and were on their way to the market street to meet with the council. The council insisted that they stop there so they could be given supplies to help in their journey. Despite their strength, the elder men and women still worried about them because they were only 17 and would be traveling alone. Hinata walked beside Naruto with their fingers interlaced. She kept looking up at him with a smile that always made him want to kiss her and a sparkle in her eyes that told him she wanted more than just that. As they started to round the corner into the market, they heard a murmur that would signal the sounds of businesses happily serving customers. What greeted Naruto's eyes was not the scene of commerce, but the entire village filling the street from one side to the other. There were decorations lining the awnings and windows of the stores. Just in front of them was a small stage where the head councilman stood with a smile and was encouraging them to stand up there with him. Na and Hinata did so, and Naruto was in complete shock. The more than 200 villages that currently called Usuzu home came to see him off. The village had more than doubled since they arrived as people came by boat looking for a new life. The elderly councilman Aguri then turned to them. "Manado-sama, Suki-sama, we cannot thank you enough for all that you have done for this village and these people. We were lost in the darkness and the light that you both brought here has made us whole once again. We now have a sense of pride, a feeling of honor, family that is not bound by blood and hope." This would not have been possible without the both of you. Naruto, for the first time in his life, was completely speechless. Yes, Hinata took his breath away, but the feelings of these people were tangible. It was almost more than he could bear. Aguri then knelt in front of him, and Naruto was about to stop him until the man set a box down. It must have been some sort of going-away gift he was trying to open. Then he looked out at the crowd and he saw the whole village do the same. Everyone was on their hands and knees with their heads down as a show of gratitude, respect, and loyalty to Hinata and him. He was pulled back to reality as he heard Aguri speak again. The man was still kneeling. In the past of this village, long before its destruction, a single figure lived for the people who call this place home. His wisdom guided him as a light guides a ship to shore in the darkest of times. His strength protects them not by standing alone but with those who share his resolve. Love rules him as this village becomes more than its structures or its people but as a living embodiment of everyone within it as it was his own child. He was the Azukage of Azuzuaka, and with this knowledge we ask you to take the mantle as you have already been that and more to us. In his hands was a robe made of the purest white silk Naruto had ever seen. At the bottom was a swirl design that the village was known for, in bright blue. It was a cage robe that denoted the leader of a hidden village. Not sure what to do, he looked at Hinata, who was leaning against his side for any sign that would help him get out of this embarrassing situation. She was looking up at him with a smile that could have melted the thickest snow-capped mountain in the land of snow. Tears were rolling down her cheeks as she watched him, wondering if he would ever take his dream. Konoha, present day. Finally, it was all done. The last of the papers stamped and approved. There wasn't but a small pile in the now done box that could be seen in the whole office. It was only early afternoon. Time to relax. Sunyunit decided to celebrate with her favorite friend. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small bottle, taking a swig to start it off before retrieving a small dish. She was about to turn her chair to gaze out the window at the nearly completed Konoha village. Things were progressing at a rapid pace without the threat of another war. Namely, because the Akatsuki could no longer attain the 9 tails because Naruto had died, taking the demon with him. That had been the most unwelcomed gift she had ever received. Sunyunit would have faced down the death god himself if it meant she could hear him call her back and one more time. Suddenly, the door swung open and in walked her assistant. Slowly started to turn back around, expecting a stack of paper 3 feet high to now occupy her desk. Lady Sunyunit-sama, this just arrived for you, Shazan said as she placed a red folder on her desk. Seeing that it wasn't more paperwork, she would have set the stack on fire. She opened it and skimmed through it. This is the recent report on the Azu Nuni, she said with boredom apparent in her voice. Yes, my lady, was the response. Looking through it, she saw that the old daimyo was thrown out and replaced. Nothing unusual there as far as news that happened every few years. Evidently, there had also been increases in trade with the land of waves as well. Maybe the new leadership had some compassion and brains for government. Then there was a very interesting report. A band of pirates tried to raid the village under new management and were beaten back. Not uncommon. But what was concerning was the pictures that came with the report. The dead were nothing unusual in a failed raid. Bodies were bodies, but the survivors had more concerning injuries. There was a photo of one man's stomach, and on it was a seal, not that of a gentry, but that of a Kra seal. Someone had used a seal in combat. By the looks of it, he will not wake until someone breaks the seal. There was also testimony of 2 men that were stuck to the sand of the beach where the battle was by what they described as Fujitsu technique. The last photo was the most disturbing yet. It was a picture of a pirate that looked to be screaming in pain. Complete and utter horror played across his face. Along with the raw emotion, there was a seal that spread across his face as well. It was a difficult seal and one had never seen before. Most seals in the modern day were basic and served as tools rather than weapons. They protected rooms, homes, and stored stuff within scrolls. It had been many decades since a seal was ever designed to be used in combat. Most people didn't use them this way because of the chakra drain it caused and the limited number of seals that were known. This sent a chill up Sade's spine. Someone had found the Uzumaki library. Shazan was staring at her sensei waiting on any orders concerning the report and Sunyunit did not fail to deliver. Get me Shiki Maruara now. Na stood in the council chambers too nervous to sit. He didn't give them an answer when they were in front of the whole village. He needed to know something first. His life and the life of the woman he loved could not be lived in a total lie. Na asked to speak to the council before he gave his decision, and he didn't know if he was going to be making a huge mistake he couldn't take back. The council members sat in their respective chairs, and Naruto grabbed the hand of Hinata for the strength he desperately needed right now. Honored Council of Usuzu Shioka, before I make this decision, I would like you to hear me out and rethink your offer. He looked down at Hinata, who had a supportive smile and love in her lavender eyes. She nodded at him as she knew what he was about to do. The man that you thought I was and my wife are nothing but a facade of our creation to protect ourselves and the ones we love. He stood there waiting for some sort of reaction from the council, but none came, with only the council leader. Aguri just nodded at him to continue. My name is Naruto Uzuaki and this is Hinata Hyuga. Then there was a slight murmur amongst the council now, and it almost broke Naruto's confidence. They had heard tales of the two standing before them, and they had all ended with the deaths. Aguri looked at each of the council members for the decision. Slowly they stood as the talking stopped. Na expected them to walk out and ask for their banishment. Then they did something he never expected. The surrounding members bowed to the couple while Aguri spoke. Naruto Uzumaki, heir to the land of Uzu Nunkuni, and his wife Hinata Hyuga, whom has brought us into the light of the world. We will swear our allegiance to you as the Usuzuke, no matter the name you choose. The deeds of a man are not judged by his name, but his actions and compassion shown to the people he cares for. For you wish to protect those people by remaining dead to the world. We will continue your wish to remain so. No one outside this council will speak of your true identities. We will take this knowledge to our graves. Until you see fit, you will be known here as Manado and Tsukisei, the Usuzuke of Usuzu Shiogaka. If you would take the position, he looked across the men and women in front of him, and small tears crept to the corners of his eyes. I will accept your offer to lead this village, to protect it and nurture it as my own family. I will become your Azukage. As he said that, Hinata draped the cloak around his shoulders, and he couldn't help the tears that fell from his face. The council then stood and walked out to announce the news to the village. Instantaneously, there was a cheer that could deafen the ears. He looked down at Hinata as she grabbed his hand and placed his palm against her stomach. We are so proud of you. 2 weeks later, a young shinobi of Konoha was getting ready to leave the boat after such a long journey. Although he had traveled with Ino and Choji, they stayed by at the port town in the land of fire. The mission was simple and an escort would only be necessary up to a certain point. Sunyunad had sent him to introduce himself to the new leader of the Uzu Shioka as a representative of Konoha. When he argued about taking the job, thinking that maybe a Hyuga clan member or someone more proficient in politics would be better suited for diplomatic reasons. The reason he was chosen was because he could assess the strengths and weaknesses of any threats. The Hokage wanted to know what was happening to this once destroyed island. Ino and Choji could not come along as they wanted the threat seen by Konoha to be as little as possible. This was going to be a troublesome mission. Shikamaru walked off the loading plank and stood on the dock. As he looked up, he was surprised to see that there was a sprawling village taking shape right in front of him. Several docks lined the small harbor, and some were designated for fishing alone, and this seemed to be a staple of their trade goods with nearby villages and towns. Others were used for goods and merchandise brought into and out of the small country. The harbor was busy as ships unloaded cargo, and a fish market was selling to local customers. All the docks came to a post station where it was guarded by what looked like shinobi. Sure enough, the guards were dressed as shinobi and even wore forehead protectors, most not on the forehead at all, though unlike his, though they had a whirlpool symbol in the center rather than the leaf. As he approached the post, he gave a woman behind the counter a slight bow and introduced himself. Hello, I am Shikamaru from Kanahagakar within the land of fire. I am a representative on behalf of the Hokage and wish to speak to the leader of your village. You mean the UK, Lord Manado say. The woman then looked up to see the pineapple-headed young man standing in front of her. She almost wanted to chuckle and tried to get the hair on the back of his head to lie down. She then looked down at a little girl behind the counter with her. She was a cute little girl who resembled the woman in front of him. Can you go to the tower and tell the UK that a representative from Konoha is here to see him? Yes, mommy, the little girl said before she took off in a burst of speed. Shikamaru just watched the little girl as she ran into the village. He then noticed that the girl, who was no more than 8 or 9, was wearing a forehead protector around her right thigh. A genin, maybe this village has already developed a shinobi training program, he thought to himself. A village this young was progressing faster than it should be. If reports were correct, the recent restructuring and development of this village had only been ongoing for the last 4 to 5 months. The amount of people in the market area past the gate would suggest the population was well over 1,000 and the received intel only placed them near 300. Die, the woman said to the young man next to her, bringing Shikamaru's attention back to the people in the port post. Can you please escort Shikamaru-san to the UK office? She now addressed the representative with a slight bow. Please, if you will follow Daki-san, he will take you to see him. Shikamaru bowed in return and thanked her for the hospitality before proceeding to follow his guide through the village. Along the main road, there were shops and stalls. Most of the buildings looked like they were just built or completely refurbished. For the most part, everything near the center of the village appeared new. As Shikamaru looked toward the outer edges of the village, he could see the ruins of where the once great from the past had stood. In some of those areas, there were ongoing construction projects as if a surgeon was carefully repairing the damage to the body of the once great village. In the UK office, Naruto was sitting behind his desk going through paperwork on some of the rebuilding projects that were taking place. The village was coming along quickly, but since it was still in its infancy, resources had to be used to optimize their efforts. The office looked very much like the Hokage office back in Konoha with the exception of another desk that sat to the side of his. At that side desk sat Hinata, who was also going through some paperwork. Most of her work had to deal with trade and diplomatic relations with some of their supply partners. With the representation of the villages from the council, many of the needs and wants of the village were met with her knowledge of how politics worked. The door burst open as a very excited eye skidded to halt and nearly fell over due to her momentum into the Azuki's desk. Manado-sama, she said, breathing heavily. Hinata looked up at the bundle of energy addressing her husband and she just smiled. Slow down, Icon. What is so important that's got you worked up? Na said as a smile spread across his face at the sight of his favorite student. Still panting a little, she looked up at him. There is a representative from Konoha here to see you. Immediately Naruto and Hinata's eyes met and there was apprehension about the news. How many, I-chan? He spoke. Just one, UK-sama. I think his name was Shikamaru-san, she said, doing her best to regulate her breathing so she could address Naruto properly. Na looked at the small girl. Now relax and you don't have to be so formal with me. Go and stand your post with your mother. Remember, the duties in the village are just as important as the missions outside of it. I'm counting on you to keep us safe. Yes, Minnie, I said with a blushing smile before she took off again, leaving the office. As the door closed again, Naruto looked back at Hinata. I guess it can't be helped. It is sooner than I wanted, but given the development of the village, it is later than I expected. Hinata felt a little bit of nervousness in her stomach. Or was it morning sickness? At least it is Shikamaru, and he knows we are still alive, so it won't come as such a shock. Hinata reached into her desk and took out a veil, placing it on her head to cover her face while still allowing her to see through it. Naruto brought up his face wrap to cover him from the neck up to his eyes and put on the Azuki hat that had the kanji for whirlpool on the front of it. Well, let's hope this goes well. We really need more time before the world is ready to know that we are still alive. There are a lot of loose ends out there that need to be taken care of first. Naruto said as he looked at the folder sitting to his right that he got back just a week prior. It was few minutes before there was knock on the door and Naruto asked the guests to come in. In stepped Dai and a young Junin from their past. Tears started to well up in Hinata's eyes and she did her best to keep them from showing. Na, on the other hand, had a large smile on his face and would have been a dead giveaway if most of his face wasn't covered. Thank you, Dai. Can you please close the door as you leave? Naruto said, trying not to laugh. As the door clicked into place, Shikamaru stepped forward to the center of the desk and bowed deeply. Thank you, Usazuke, for seeing me. My name is Shikamaru Na from Konoha, and I have come here on behalf of the Hokage. Please take a seat. Na gestured to a chair and waited for Shikamaru to get seated. Now, what would the Hokage want to know from me? The Hokage would like to congratulate you on the rapid development of your village and wishes to extend a hand of peace to benefit everyone, Shikamaru said with a smirk before he continued. Nah, oh. Come on, Shikamaru. Wasn't it at least a little convincing? Na said as he removed his Azukage hat and pulled down his mask. Besides, there are few in this village who know who we are, and we need to keep it that way for the time being. If anyone was to find out that we are still alive, it would ruin everything and it would send the ninja world into war. Shikamaru looked over at Hinata and saw that she already removed her veil and there were tears in her eyes. She got up and ran over to him, giving him a big hug even though he was still in the chair. Shikamaru returned it gently. I hope he is treating you well, Hinata-chan. He then addressed Naruto again as he waited for Hinata to compose herself so she would let him go. I understand and I have kept the secret all this time. What is this war that would take place and why? Na then got out of his chair and picked up the file he had on his desk. Leaning against the desk, he handed the file to Shikamaru when Hinata had stood again. She then went to Naruto and leaned her back into his chest as he spoke. It is all in here. We know who leads the Akatsuki. We know what he is doing to some extent, but we do not know why, as it doesn't follow his past movements. Go ahead and look at this file, then tell me what you think. Shikamaru quickly scanned through the papers, then looked up at his friend, clearly a slight hint of shock on his face that most wouldn't notice. None of this is in our history teachings. How did you get this? I started to get some information from Jiraiya-sensei's spy network. That and when we got here, my clan had a large library of the history of the shinobi world up until the destruction of Azununi. This is the culmination of what I have gathered over the last 5 months, Naruto said. If this is the leader, then he shouldn't be alive. How is he alive and leading any organization? Shikamaru said in disbelief. We don't know. We don't even know if it is conclusive. We only know the pattern and the insistent use of the nine-tailed fox. At least a name will give us an idea of what he is capable of. With us remaining in hiding, he will have to wait before he can even try to destroy the village again. One of the things that has concerned me though is why the other tailed beasts, Naruto said rhetorically as he knew more information would be needed to find out the whole truth. Letting out a sigh of how troublesome the new information was, he responded. Only time will tell. What should I tell Sama about all this? Nothing at the moment, he said, knowing he would have to convince his friend to trust him. Shikamaru then raised an eyebrow at the strange request. You know she is my Hokage. My loyalty is to her Na. This is vital information that could help protect Konoha. There was a brief pause as Naruto thought about all of his friends back in his old home. That is the way it seems, Shikamaru. But this guy is dangerous. My loyalties still rest on Ba-chan and always will. For the sake of the village and my friends, I need more time to figure out what to do and how to defeat him. He was the one that controlled pain. You saw what a difficult time I had with him. Then there is the matter of a few loose ends. Those loose ends go by the names of Kabuto, who was running around out there with Snake Freak's face. And Naruto gulped at the thought of bringing it up. Sasaki. Sitting there, Shikamaru thought about everything he had just heard. Pain killed nearly everyone in the village. Would have even killed Naruto if the fox hadn't surfaced and then be resealed. The report Na has suggests this guy can even control the fox somehow. This guy wasn't after just the destruction of Konoha, but more than likely after a larger portion of the elemental nations. Also, the fact that the world has now accepted Naruto and Hinata's death gives them an element of surprise when the attack does happen. That would be ruined if more people knew the truth about the couple. There would also be the ability to eliminate some of the other problems that have their sights set on Konoha's destruction. You know, I hate to admit it, but you are right. Shikamaru smacked his lips at the taste of those words. It just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, though. I knew this would be a troublesome mission. Na reached out and pulled Shikamaru out of the chair. How about I take you out and show you around? By the way, we are known as Manado and Suki-sei outside of this room. Yeah. Shikamaru then looked at Hinata and I just wanted to say congratulations. Hinata looked down at her ring and twisted it in place on her finger. Thank you, Shikamaru-san. We are happy together. He then noticed the ring on Hinata's hand. He walked over to her and started to study it. I wasn't talking about the marriage. I was talking about the baby. Hinata jumped when he said it. How does he know? She thought. What makes Yo-UT think I'm PR pregnant? Still looking at the ring with great interest. The emotional mood swings from crying to calm. The accelerated heartbeat when you hug me, which was too fast for excitement. Also, occasionally you grazed your hand against your stomach as if you were caressing something. Hey, nah. He turned his head and saw he wore a ring just like Hinata's but wider. Where did you ever get these rings? He caught you, Hinata-chan. Naruto saw Hinata turn so red in the face. He didn't think there was going to be enough blood in her body to support the baby. I made them myself. I wanted to buy some real rings, but Hinata-chan says she will never wear another one on that finger besides the one I made. That reminds me, you got to stay at least another 2 days for the wedding. You haven't gotten married yet. Shikamaru looked at the both of them. Hinata spoke up to defend their relationship. We consider ourselves married and it has always been good enough for us. But when the village made Narutkan their UK, he told the elders who we were. They insisted that they were going to throw a wedding for us in honor of what we did for the villagers. If I remember right, one said, this will be for the birth of the village and the birth of your shared love. Hinata said the last part with a blush, but I think he was drunk. Well, we are now and it will be great to have you there, Naruto said with a cheeky smile. Can I ask you a favor though? Shikamaru said before Naruto cut him off. You want a set for you and Tamari. You are planning on asking her to marry you and are too bothered to look at all the rings. Also, you haven't found one that is unique enough to give to her. Na said knowing he hit the nail on the head. Hinata held back until there was confirmation. She just listened to Shikamaru. How did you know? He then hung his head in half shame. It is just so troublesome getting engaged. He said that last part just as Hinata squealed in excitement for her friend and tackled him to the floor in a hug. She had missed her friends so much that she was happy to hear that the others were getting a chance to be just as happy as she was. Na walked over to the door and waited for the other two to compose themselves. When you guys are ready, we can go. Let's go, Hinata. There is a lot to show Shikamaru. She ran over and wrapped her arms around one of his, resting her head on his shoulder while they all walked around the budding village. The three talked about all that happened over the time since Naruto and Hinata left the Hidden Leaf village. Hinata was delighted by how all of her friends were doing, and Naruto was happy that the village was completed for the most part, and life there was returning to normal. 2 days later, the early morning sun was coming over the horizon, and in the west, the night was slipping away. Orange and yellow graced the surface of the ocean view off in the distance as everyone gathered in the open clearing for the event that would be just as memorable as the rest did her head on his shoulder while they all walked around the budding village. HVEE made Naruto-kun theorize the village was founded just below the eastern cliff. The village was in a state of sleep as the inhabitants left their houses and shops to bear witness. The only people that remained below were those that volunteered to watch the posts, keeping the home. They worked so hard to grow safe from those that would push them back into the darker days. On a cliffside clearing they had gathered, and the sight was one that spoke of the loyalty and devotion everyone held for the young leader, the love he shared for the village, and more importantly to the woman who captured his heart. In front of the pagod, the villagers spread out far and wide to see the couple they had sworn allegiance to. Not everyone could see, but those that couldn't were happy enough to just be part of the occasion. Towering above the event stood a large toad that was adorned with tattoos and a scar over one eye. Two smaller, but still very large toads stood beside the larger one of orange and red, while the other was yellow. At the steps of the memorial monument stood a young woman with long dark hair, which had a blue hue to it, flowing untied down the length of her back. Her pale lavender eyes were moist and she did her best to control the tears that threatened to mar the little bit of makeup she decided to wear. Her ceremonial kimono was designed with an adornment of violet silk threading that complemented her fair complexion. Irises decorated the bottom of the kimono with stamens that shined bright orange as a perfect color to draw the eyes to appreciate the decoration. Across from her stood the young Azuki dressed in his official robe with the flowing symbols of the whirlpool at the bottom of the material. They were as blue as the young man's eyes, which showed joy, admiration, love, and just a little bit of lust for the woman that stood in front of him. Behind the groom stood the young Konoha genius as a witness to the event. He was not only there to represent his village in this union, but as a dear friend to both of them. This was one of the rare moments in his young life where nothing about the event was troublesome. Between the couple stood two more toads who presided over the marriage. Both were small in comparison to the larger ones. Each was green in color, one having white hair and the other being purple. Both dressed in black robes and were obviously old and wise despite their bantering. The vows had already been completed, and as a gift to the couple, the toads had decided to honor them with accepting the bride as a member of the Toad clan. A large scroll was laid at their feet, and Hinata bent down to accept such a gift that was the rarest of honors. Cutting her finger, she wrote her name on the scroll and placed her fingerprints at the bottom. After standing up, Naruto took her hand and kissed the wound, gently causing the blood to stop. The scroll disappeared in a puff of smoke, marking the end of the ceremony. He took her into his arms and lifted her blushing face by her cheek, kissing her passionately as the crowd of witnesses erupted into cheers. Returning to Konoha, it took 2 weeks to make the trip back to Konoha, and Shikamaru had to devise a plan on what he would tell the Hokage about his meeting with Na. There were a lot of things that Sunyunid wanted answered, but some of it would have to be put off or diverted because of the agreement he made with the young couple. A lot of the information he could answer, and it would be entirely truthful, but some would have to be skirted. As he opened the door and walked into the paper-filled office, he prepared himself for the interrogation of a lifetime. "Lady Hokage, I have returned to give my report," he said as he placed a file with the written details on the desk. Sunyunid picked up the file and started to look through it. "Have a seat, Shikamaru, while I read over this quickly." After 5 minutes, she dropped the folder on the desk and addressed her youngest advisor. "So, what is the newly rediscovered Osazuaka like?" "It is a lot like our village, but with a port. There are some similarities between the two as they have a shinobi training program and a busy commerce district. I was a little surprised at the difference in the intel we did have on it from what was actually there," he said while adjusting himself, trying to not sound any different. "What are those differences and how far have they progressed since the new construction took place?" Sunsade responded, looking for all the information she could. Thinking hard as to not draw too much attention to the island from the legendary Sannin, he responded. "Their population is larger than expected, estimated at over 1,000 at this time. This could be the result of clan relocation or several for that matter. Also, with the increase in trade with the Land of Waves in our own port town, it is likely some merchants have decided to take up residence. Also, they have schooling to teach shinobi, which the Osazuke does take part in to help bolster their strength. Their manpower is low, but their talent provides a strong, capable force. The villagers have become enthusiastic over the rebuilding of the city ruins in the area, and if I was to give a estimate about what I saw, I would say that nearly 40% of the original city has been rebuilt. With the increase in population, it would seem likely that the city would have progressed rapidly, thought. What about hostilities? Do you feel that there is any way the village is a threat to any of its neighbors or us? It is just the opposite actually. A continuous peace is what they have displayed from what I have seen. There doesn't seem to be any deceit from the people I interacted with or even from the UK, Shikamaru said, thinking things were going along well. What can you tell me about this UK? She said with piqued interest for a new village that didn't have any ill will toward anyone else. Usually, villages started because they were forced from their old homes due to oppression and eventually want revenge. Shikamaru thought quickly for a way to describe Naruto without revealing who he really was. His name is Manado-sei and then there is his wife Suki. They're a young couple and appear to be happy. From what I have seen of his training regimen and his control of jutsu, he is a strong person in skill. I would put him in the class range of Kage. As far as raw power goes, his wife seems highly adept with political awareness and is respected by elders and their council in her decision making. I only wished she had the respect that this other woman had from her own council. Were you able to find any information of the hidden library there? They did have a library, but it was far from hidden. As far as the one you questioned about, I saw no such area or building, he said plainly, knowing that something like that wouldn't be made public, she had to ask anyways. Was there any progress in the development of a peace treaty or alliance with the Land of Fire or Konoha? Do you think they would be willing to have such an agreement? Thinking back to Naruto, he would have done one in a heartbeat with his own blood. But the knucklehead knew if things progressed too rapidly in the political arena, there would be a greater interest in his true identity. I spoke with the UK and his wife on the matter, and they would be willing to work out such an agreement in the future. But it is a matter that they take very seriously. His concerns are that if there is an outbreak of violence, he wouldn't be able to send adequate forces or supplies to help in the effort. For the time being, the Ursuzuki did say he would like to extend a non-aggression pact with Konoha. This agreement he has put forth does come with some stipulations. It figures a person attains a little bit of power and they think they have the right to ask for anything when they come to the table. Thought, what are these stipulations he wants? He wants 2 long-term representatives from Konoha to stay there at Ashoga to assist in the development of their country. They would be there to handle trade relations between the 2 lands and give voice to the merchants whose business resides here in our port town. He said this wasn't much of a concession for a non-aggression pact, as that would more than likely happen on its own. It would be a sign of relief if she could expedite the process and help put the fire daimyo at ease over the development of the new village. When should I expect the Ursuzuki to arrive for the agreement? He said he wouldn't be able to leave his country for some time, but assured me that he would sign all agreements and send them back to you once the representatives reach the village with the pact you have written. I believe that he does not want to leave the island because of it being in its infancy. Some other nations may see an opening like that as a sign of weakness and try to take advantage. Shikimaru hoped that would settle the Hoage's uneasiness about the lack of FaceTime with a new cage. Not pleased, but understanding the political games that nations play and their more than willingness to jump at the chance to take advantage of a weak village. Even she couldn't leave the village due to the recent destruction and the view that other nations would have about Konoha. Especially with the death of Naruto, who held the 9-tailed fox, the village would be a prime target without a strong person to stand at its head. I suppose you already thought of the 2 who would fit the requirements of the Ursuzuki, Sunyunid said, holding up a memo that Shikamaru had written down on his choices for possible representatives. One was a good choice, the other she was unsure of. Yes, those 2, I believe, would be the best to represent Konoha and meet the needs of not only the Ursuzuki, but also would amplify our relations with that country. There is a lot of business happening even in that small country, and the land they have mapped out will more than likely double the available usable land there. This will be a great advantage to us in trade and would bring a lot of supplies and merchandise. Not to mention the monetary value of the extra trade to be had with a city under construction, he said, hoping to drive the point home of the release of those 2 shinobi as a benefit to the nation. Naruto would promote extra trade anyways, but didn't need to know that right now. Borinade called. An Ambu agent appeared out of almost nowhere. Take this list and retrieve these 2 shinobi for me. They are to be here in 10 minutes. No excuses. Yes, Lady Hokage-sama. And with that, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for